Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, I have the usual crew. We have Josh Torres.
Everything happened this week, apparently.
We have Adam Vitale.
Hello.
We have James Galizio.
When it rains, it pours.
And Chow Min Woo.
How's it going?
So what James and Josh are referring to is that we have a ton of news to go through today. This whole podcast will likely be 90% news focused about what came out of Gamescom. We had a small Nintendo Direct. Square Enix seemed to decide to update all of their works in progress with new trailers or press releases. So we tried to list everything here, get it in a nice, meaningful order. We're going to go through it. We have a bunch of stuff up on the site for some new releases. So we're going to focus a little bit less on just talking about games we've been playing. A lot of us are kind of still working through the deluge of August releases. And it's going to be very news focused. So hopefully that's your jam. We're going to go through it. We're going to try to poke out all the most exciting details from Gamescom or other events that all seem to happen in the last 7 days. There's a few announcements in here, some that were kind of expected and some that are kind of out of nowhere. A lot of gameplay trailers. So a podcast might not be the most suitable to talk about gameplay trailers specifically, but we'll go ahead and pick out the highlights there and go through what we thought were the neatest ones we saw, and a few new release dates and a few other details. So we're just going to kind of go through that in as good of an order as we can. To talk about games we have been playing, there's really only one that we need to highlight just kind of briefly at the start here, and it's related to a couple features that are up on the site. We mentioned in the last couple weeks, we had obviously a bunch of the Xenoblade guides and the review, and in last week, Soul Hackers 2 went up, and the review was up last week, and over the last 7 days, Adam has also put a bunch of guides up on that. Obviously, that released just a couple days ago at the time of this recording, so if you're working through Soul Hackers 2, not only do we have the review up on the site, but we have a bunch of guides for that. So this week, the iteration for the next game is we have a review up for SD Gundam Battle Alliance. So Josh was able to talk about this briefly in a previous episode of the podcast in a preview capacity. In the last 7 days, he did put up a official review up on the site, along with at least one guide for it for the blueprints, which I don't know the details of that, but I'm going to just hand it off to Josh. Since Josh did mention and go through some details about his thoughts on Battle Alliance earlier, this might be a little bit abbreviated, but here's a chance just to kind of give some final thoughts, go through like what made it into his review, his impressions of the game, and we'll just kind of kick things off with that before we go into the big news deluge. So Josh, SD Gundam Battle Alliance.
This game's pretty interesting because this is, as I mentioned at the beginning of my review, this is the first game from Studio Arctic in a really long time. This is the first game in like about a decade, with their last Gundam developed game being the Gundam Seed Battle Destiny on the Vita in 2012. And for people who don't know about Studio Arctic, they were very much, kind of a smaller Japanese developer. They also developed Triangle Strategy earlier this year.
I was about to say, didn't they do one of the Square Enix games? And it was Triangle Strategy.
Yeah. So they really, for Gundam fans, they really reached their peak around the PSP era because they came out with titles like Gundam Battle Chronicle and Gundam Battle Universe that never got official localizations. But during back then, like I was, when I was playing on my PSP, admittedly, I was in that crowd of like, I kind of quote unquote obtained those games, not necessarily imported them, but I like Gundam, and I was like, okay, I want to, tinker around with those games. So seeing this game being developed by Arctic really, really struck a chord with me because like, okay, I really like those titles they did when I was like way younger. So going to Battle Alliance, when I last talked about it, it was like a brief demo of it that was up on consoles, and then the full game really surprised me. There's an action RPG. You have like your standard action RPG battle system of like your light and heavy attacks into like air combos. And it's like it's very basic stuff, but then you can like kind of mix around like sub weapons that like each suit has that are usually like very unique per playable robot in the game. And each playable robot has like 1 of 3 roles, whether they're like melee focused in there with an infighter, an all-rounder which is balances melee in range, and sharpshooter which is more tuned to like using their sub weapons and ranged options. And there's like their stat allocations are kind of influenced by like their job, along with like certain action roles that they have. Like with sharpshooters, they can refill their sub weapons instantly. With all rounders, they can cancel into like longer combos and so forth. So what really surprised me going through this game, because I primarily obviously played it solo for the review of this has a big multiplayer element, but I was like, okay, like it's kind of a weird effect when people see like the SD super deformed aesthetic. They're like, oh, okay, this is probably for like tuned for a younger crowd, more of a casual, game, like more on the easy side. Going through the solo, no, this is actually a strangely challenging game, and that's because that you're when you go out into missions up to three, like a three party team can go out, and you can pair yourselves with two AI partners going through it solo. The AI partners are really really dumb in this game, and they can't be trusted. Because when you go out in battle, you only have a limited amount of healing items on you, and that depends on role too. With infighters only getting 3 healing items, and sharpshooters only getting a maximum of 5, and then like every hit you get when you're like on like either when you're under leveled or like on par with the level of like enemies, they hurt, and that damage adds up because these are just basically linear stages. You go through grunts, and then there's usually a boss battle at the end. And then stages usually take an average of 10 minutes. Some can get a little longer and later on.
So I just want to check with something. Like
Yeah.
on the allied team, is it always
Yeah.
the same number of mobile suits, but it's just if you're playing single player, your team is comprised of AI, and then if you're playing with players,
Yeah.
you,
Yeah, so
they
you have a
substitute
thing-
in. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so like when you're
So
a
you're
playable
at a
character-
disadvantage with
Yeah, pretty much
single-
because
unless your
when
friends
you
are
go-
terrible.
Exactly. When you go down in battle, usually you can use a repair kit, like when you're limited healing. I used to do an emergency repair, which will get you up without the help of anyone, but you'll still be at low HP. You just got yourself up without needing anyone else, or you need to wait for someone to get you up. And a lot of the game centers around like threat management, like bosses. They'll always like display when you see their health bar, you'll see who they're aggroed to. In single player, it becomes of like, okay, do I just get myself back up and like risk like taking one of my healing items, or do I just wait for my dumb AI? And usually the AI being having the enemy's attention will also be the one trying to revive you. So it's kind of like you can't really strategize around them. You're more like babysitting and try to have some form of self preservation because your AI partners don't. So it's I had an okay time with it in single player, but that's like with the heavy like acknowledgement that like this game is probably way better in multiplayer. So when the PC version came out, since I got a pre-release code on the PlayStation, I picked it up on PC and played a ton of it with my friends. And the multiplayer aspect of this game is really really fun when you're just playing with buddies, because you guys can like help each other out. There's actually they're actually putting in their own like good damage, unlike your AI partners, which attack very slowly. They're not really that aggressive. Of course, way better than just like human partners are just way better to have with you in general. So, I guess my recommendation is like if you're looking for like if you like Gundams, because this is like a crossover Gundam story, and like it is a pretty fun crossover Gundam story. Because like the basic outline is like, hey, there's like you're basically viewing Gundam timelines in a simulation, and like something has gone wrong in this simulation where like other Gundams from other Gundam series and timelines are starting to break through other ones. So you have to like kind of repair the canon of each universe represented in the game. So like the two like anime girls like giving like their commentary on like what's going on. They're like part of the story. Like one of them, it comes from a perspective of like they don't know anything about Gundam because they were kind of sucked up from the 1 Year War, and then another one is just an AI construct and like having to like explain what these Gundam series are to someone who's totally like not doesn't have any background at all. It's pretty amusing because it's very like a lot of the dialogue is very flavorful with Gundam fan service and so forth. So like it's
That
pretty
seems like it's well suited for someone who might have like a passing interest of Gundam or has seen a series or three.
yeah,
but
maybe, yeah.
needs a little bit of guidance for like, oh, I kind of recognize, I saw this one, but I never saw it show, and then having these two characters act as kind of like being able to introduce it to that audience.
Yeah,
I don't know, seems like a good framework for it.
It is interesting because I've had some friends who have like I've never really watched a Gundam, but then they gave this a shot because they like action RPGs. So now obviously like they kind of have questions like, oh, what's going on with this character? What's going on with this character? And having other friends explain to them like how crazy Gundam series are in general, and like kind of giving some sort of background to it has been a really funny experience in that regard. So like I guess if you're a fan of action RPGs and you want to play an action RPG that's actually well like tuned for multiplayer and not just like incidental, like I guess a comparison would be like Gundam Breaker 3, for example, where like you can play multiplayer in that game and it's fine, like you know you guys are having a good time, but like you like there's not really content in the game that's like is really constructed for multiplayer. It's just like you guys are just beating up on something and just having a good time, but there's not really any form of teamwork. Unlike in SD Gundam Battle Alliance, where like the combat is more well balanced and well more like it's more the conservative side. You're not like a living, walking one man army god like in Gundam Breaker 3. Eventually, you really every mobile suit has been like deliberately tuned to like work with others, and like so like their objects are more limited, but they're more deliberately crafted uh in a way. So like the big mobile armor bosses like the Psycho Gundam, Destroy Gundam, the Big Zam, you know, those bosses are like very threatening in this game because they hit really, really hard. And inevitably, like several of your teammates, including you, will probably like get KO'd in the middle of battle. So like a lot of that's like, okay, this person's down, I have aggro, go res them while I have aggro. So it's a pretty neat experience. It's definitely not something that you don't see much in Gundam games. It's a fairly novel in that space. And I was really surprised because I was really wondering, like, you know, it's kind of a weird thing when this game released on Steam. I think it saw as a mixed review, and a lot of those, it's really funny. A lot of those mixed reviews come from like players that played like an SD, like Capsule or SD Go MMO that was like, I think it was primarily in Korea, and that was like many years ago. So their complaints are, it's not the MMO that I used to play like ages ago, which is like crazy, you know, because they never said it was gonna be that. But it's also when I look at like active player base and numbers on Steam. Obviously, you know, I only rely on Steam charts for this. I don't know how the console versions are because there's no crossplay unless it's like the same family of systems. But when I like to go check the Steam charts for this game, like there's a lot of active players on this. Last time I checked this morning was like over 20,000, and it's like that's crazy. Like I really wonder, you know, how well this will do, and like whether it falls in line with like does Spamco sees this as a success out of the gate. You know, I'm really wonder like if people are really if it's like just stealthily catching on behind the scenes. You know, in between like bigger, more popular releases coming out now. You know, like Soul Hackers 2, for example. So I don't know. Maybe there's like
let's see.
a
SD Gundam Battle Alliance has 10,000 players on Steam right now, at the time of the recording, and Soul Hackers 2 has, let's see, 4,000. So
it's kind of
clearly,
a comparison.
SD Gundam Battle Alliance.
Yeah.
I know this is like apples and tomatoes, but they are so 10,000 versus 4,000. So clearly, SD Gundam Battle Alliance has sold 2.5 times as much. Like that's
There
just
we go.
math.
SD Gundam sweep. There we go. We're in there. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed my time with this game. This is like I said, if you have some like-minded friends who want to like just play a co-op action RPG and have a good time, and like it has like it's pretty challenging. Like it won't you, it's not something you can just like easily like you know roll over. You know, this might be a game for you. Like there's still the demo up on like PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. There's no Steam demo, so if you guys have access to that or interested in checking it out, seeing if it's for you, give that a try. It's like the early stages of the game, so it's a bit on the easier side. But like you know, see if it's like if the battle system is for you, if you like how things are. And there's you know a lot of like RPG elements. You do level up suits, you level their stats, you equip them parts, you uncap their levels. The further you go in, and so on. So there's a lot. It's a pretty meaty game, and you know, circling back on like the blueprints guide on the site, like to unlock new robots in the game, you have to get their parts, their blueprints like drops from stages. So for like a lot of the later ones that you start developing, you need to like go farm like earlier stages to like you know start getting those blueprint drops. So it could be difficult to navigate in game whether what stage has like the blueprint for you. So I kind of, as I was going through the game, I was like, I wish there was a list. I was like, I'll just go make that list. So
I have the
it was.
power.
That's right. It took a long time. Believe me, it was a lot of work, but you know, people seem to like it. People are like, "Thank you so much for the list." You know, it really helps out. And yeah, just go give it a shot if you need that. It's up on the site, ready to go.
So up on the site, we've got the SD Gundam Battle Alliance review and from Josh, and also the blueprint list for the SD Gundam Battle Alliance, both up on the site. So if you have picked that up, go ahead and give both things a read. And that kind of covers us for games we've been playing, because we're basically going to push anything that we're currently working on to future podcasts as we focus this week on primarily all the news that came out that I detailed earlier in the recording. Before I do that, though, there is one feature up on the site that I do want to make sure that I highlight. So about 2 years ago, we brought along a freelancer who is an editor for ffworld.com, which is a French fan site, Jeremy Kamaric, who put together for RPG Site and his own website a really nice kind of biography for Hiroshi Takai, who is the director of Final Fantasy 16. Well, we were able to bring Jeremy back to put together a similar bio for the creative director of Final Fantasy 16, Kazutoyo Maehiro. So this is up on the site, and basically it just talks about who Maehiro is, because obviously when we talk about Final Fantasy 16, Yoshi P ends up getting a lot of kind of like the marketing buzz out of the wake of the success of Final Fantasy 14. But a couple of years ago, we were able to give Takai a highlight with the feature, but now we're also going to give it to Maehiro, talking about his understated work on Final Fantasy Tactics, on Final Fantasy 12, on Tactics Ogre. I think it's Tactics Ogre. But Jeremy basically goes through like chronologically who he is, and it's a nice companion piece to the Takai piece. Both of these are up on the site. So it kind of gives a little bit of detail of like who is developing Final Fantasy 16 and why we should be excited about it, in addition to Yoshida. So that's up on the site. It is Who is Final Fantasy 16 Creative Director Kazutoyo Maehiro Developer Profile. So I do want to go ahead.
It's an amazing developer profile. I gave it a read a few days ago, and it is
Jeremy's incredibly talented.
Yeah, very thorough, very well researched, and Jeremy was fantastic. Blew it away with this basically like biography piece on Maehiro's past works. Definitely give it a read, and a lot of it is like understanding especially a creative director's past and what they've worked on and their design philosophies will really inform you about what's next moving forward. So, I'm sure we'll definitely revisit this developer profile when FF16 comes out and seeing finding the lineage of the content FF16 has, and it can be traced back into I'm sure several of the past works that Maehiro has worked on, especially with terms of design systems, mechanics. Kind of a really big thing with developer profile with Maehiro is going especially in FF12, when you go into a new FF12 zone and you see that big monster that's way over leveled than you, almost like the Xenoblade effect of you go into this zone and you see a very challenging monster ahead of you, and you think about it, it's can I take that on? Okay, I want to give it a shot. And a lot of that is kind of with some of the things that define Maehiro's perspective on game development, which is really, really exciting to me because I love that feeling.
And Adam will be excited that both of these have call outs to The Last Remnant. So Adam will be on deck for seeing how that talent goes into Final Fantasy 16.
Well, I don't expect 16 to have any saga-like mechanics, but maybe in terms of other mechanics. So.
In terms of art direction, I can kind of see it.
For sure. Like world design and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see the lineage there.
All right, and with that, we're going to go into news. Now, there's a couple ways we could do it. We could do this. We have a lot of items here, so we're going to try to present this in as organized a manner as possible. Instead of just going chronologically and just having a hodgepodge from different developers of different types of things, I tried to kind of list this into what type of news it is. We're going to start with some gameplay trailers for some existing announced titles. We're going to go into maybe some gameplay details of announced titles that weren't accompanied by a trailer. There were a few announcements with one specific headline here that were announced this week. And then we're going to kind of go into some of the stuff that came out of the Gamescom streams, specifically Keely's stream and some of the other stuff from around that. I guess Gamescom technically ends tomorrow, but I think most of the major announcements have already filtered through the various outlets. So we'll go through the Gamescom specific news in the second half, and then we'll catch up at the very end with some release date, sales updates, minor news like we typically do. What I've listed here at the top is a gameplay trailer for a game that was announced only earlier this summer. This is Wolong Fallen Dynasty. This is the Koei Tecmo game built from the Neo team for the action RPG that takes place in the Three Kingdoms era of China. So
there's your Neo bias showing, having this as the headliner.
Oh, well, what did you have listed first? No, this is first. Yeah, so
have you seen that trailer?
Yeah,
it looks so fucking good.
Yeah, this gameplay trailer is awesome.
Yeah, so back in June, we got like a pretty long like cinematic trailer with some things that kind of hinted at what the gameplay might be like. But here we got, it's not a long trailer, but it's a minute of just gameplay without a lot of preamble or pretense, with lots of quick cuts, lots of cool enemy and environments shown. It's just, I don't know, it looks really neat, and I am biased because of the Neo, even though I haven't played Neo 1 still, so maybe I'm just a fraud. But Neo 2 is great.
Okay. Yeah, the Neo 2 is fine for covering all of Neo, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, this is great. Like it shows, like, there's a dedicated jump button in this. It's very. And they mentioned there's no stamina system in this as well, so it's very much focused on like Chinese martial arts and weapon mastery, and you see a lot of that in the trailer. It reminds me, the flow of it that they showed feels a little bit more Sekiro than Dark Souls. It does look pretty aggressive.
Josh, it's interesting you say Sekiro there when there's another Team Ninja IP that would be a better comparison point.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much more Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you see a lot of those elements from both Sekiro and Ninja Gaiden in it, and especially like when it comes to like the finishers on like some of the bosses that they show. It reminds you of like Ninja Gaiden camera choreography when you like take down those bosses. It's very fast, very visceral, and looks very promising. I like a lot of what they're saying about this game, especially because I love the Three Kingdoms era. So seeing their rendition of like a more demonic like Three Kingdom era, and like I hope to see some of my favorites there. I hope to see Cao Cao. I hope to see Xiahou Dun. I hope to see, of course, we're probably going to see Lu Bu there. Zhang Liao, like I'm just thinking of like all my favorite like characters throughout the Three Kingdoms. I'm like, I hope they're represented in some way, shape, or form in this game, and that's really exciting to me because like Dio did a similar thing with like how they portrayed Nobunaga, how they portrayed Maeda in it, and it's like, oh man, I'm so looking forward to this game.
Not to mention visually, it already looks fantastic, and this has still got like what 6-7 months in the oven before it's coming out.
Yeah, it's slated for early 2023. So I don't know if it's like late in the fiscal year or if it's going to be probably the early year period is always hard to like judge because it always seems like early next year from any given year is the packed year, but then inevitably some stuff gets delayed out of that. But right now it's just slated for early 2023.
What's exciting is we're probably going to get like direct gameplay footage of this in the coming weeks because there's going to be a playable demo at Tokyo Game Show. So I'm sure
which is mid-September,
yeah, a lot of Japanese outlets for sure are going to be uploading, what they played on it. So we get to see like what the HUD elements are and just like what players can expect when they get their hands on the controller, and that's exciting.
Yeah,
honestly, sorry,
I was just gonna say the trailer here, is, as Josh alluded to, was completely HUDless, which was fun.
Honestly, with how finished the trailer already looks and the fact it's early 2023, it might be sooner than we think. Who knows?
Maybe, yeah. And shout outs to Kite who compiled this too, because it's important to note that like this will be released in multiple languages. So a lot of the English, they have the Japanese and Chinese language for this too. Because I imagine a lot of Chinese players will want to see the Three Kingdoms properly represented in their native tongue for this game. So good on them.
Yeah, and on our news post on the site, we do have all language trailers linked. So the next game that we got a good bit of new gameplay for is the upcoming Square Enix Rune Factory, like in absence of a better word, Harvestella. So this was actually part of a Nintendo Treehouse stream earlier in the week, but also Square Enix independently shared several new screenshots and details as well. So we got A lot of new details about the Harvestella story. Obviously, some gameplay in the context of the Treehouse presentation. It was kind of appended to like some Splatoon footage and stuff as well. It's always kind of interesting to see that they've got because it is a PC and Switch release. Remember, still looks really as charming as ever. It has I really like the art in this. I forget who the artist was that was doing this game.
So the concept artist is Isamu Kamiko Kuryo. I don't know if they've shared the exact character designer for the game publicly yet. But
And Isamu's done like Final Fantasy 12 and other Ivalice art. He's also done some concept art for 16, I believe. He does a lot of Square Enix concept art, like especially like locations.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a big thing. Like with this game, like the Isamu shares like concept art of like the seasons in the game because they're a big focus, and like what the seasons look like when they kind of like go under like that bad season in the game that like has like bad stuff going on.
I feel like a little shallow because I've never really been interested in like any farming sim or even like farming sim RPG hybrid like Rune Factory. But just because like this art style is more my taste, I'm like, you know what, Harvestella looks really neat. Like I've never been interested in Rune Factory, but this one I'm like, you know what, I might make space for this one.
I mean, that's a lot of people's sentiments about this game. It's like they never really got into farming, or like they never really got to like Rune Factory or early Harvest Moon and so forth. But there's something about the aesthetic of this game that really clicks for them. I get it. You know that there's a really like distinct look in the game, both in characters and environments. Um, it was funny that like the treehouse thing was like the Harvestella gameplay came after like a Splatoon 3 segment. So like when Nintendo announced that's a really weird crossover announcement, I guess. Like there's no crossover content in the game, but like in terms of like target audience, it's like someone said, just put Harvestella at the end of Splatoon 3, you know? It's like, all right, I guess. Yeah, it's they showed, like you said, more stuff about the game. The things that stuck out to me is like, hey, like the new job, the single screenshot of the new job, the Assault Savant, looks like the character is doing a Kamehameha. And they showed like you can have pets in the game, you can have livestock. And you know, it's just kinda I think the thing that the target audience wants to know still is like, can you date people in the game? Is there romance in the game? Can you marry someone in the game?
The closest thing we know of so far is that there are character stories of the different characters, and then like there is an affinity that you gain with characters through that.
Right.
But maybe not romance, maybe romance, who knows? It doesn't seem like it. Like there's no hard evidence yet.
Yeah, we don't know. They're kind of keeping their info close to the chest. Like we just learned today with the recent news. It's like, hey, there's a whole like group of beings called omens that are hated by humans because they're kind of like part of the bad stuff that's happening. Like the omens are supposed to be the race that's like the cause of like the quietest season that's causing all the bad stuff in the game. And then like one of the very first like companions that you meet is an omen called named Dianthus, and she seems to be like her design is so cool because she's like a big like buff, like all clad in black armor, and then like her hair kind of like flows out of the helmet as well, and she has like a big staff thing. And like, cool, that's a rad-ass design. And like her heels are on her her heels on like her footwear are like, they look like stilettos that help her like keep her like frame up too. It's bizarre. It's kind of cool. I dig it.
And this is coming out this year. This is for early November 2022 for PC and Switch.
Yes.
Another one that is slated for early next year is a game that we've talked about on several occasions with like, I feel like we have a different vibe every time we talk about this. This is Square Enix and Luminous Productions Forspoken. So we got a new like 10-minute gameplay trailer that was kind of announced. We already heard about the delay to January 24 of next year for this game. This game was originally supposed to release in January of this year, wasn't it? Or early this year. Yeah. But yeah, so it's next year early. But we got a new 10-minute gameplay trailer. In recent months, I feel like Forspoken has kind of been memed on for like its quote unquote cringy, like trying to be like movie style trailer from the protagonist, from the perspective of the protagonist Frey. But now we got a 10-minute gameplay trailer from Square Enix that I think is the first time I've seen footage of this game and not kind of felt like turned off by it. It actually, because I feel like it's slowed down a little bit. It just shows some more raw gameplay of like exploration in the overworld and less flashy like camera pans of the magic attacks, which I think the magic system is cool. But I do like that this trailer for Forspoken just kind of slows down and just shows, you know, movement in the overworld, conversations with NPCs alongside traversal and some magic spells as well. So I don't know.
I think it's just like it's best to like just let this shut everyone up and just like let the game speak for itself. I'll just like this game looks cool when like you just like show gameplay and that's it. You don't have to like give like some sort of narration or what's going on or like try to like give some flavor of what's going on. Just like let the game speak for itself as, you know, someone is playing through the game normally. So like this kind of like believe it or not, this kind of like the first time you saw that like, hey, you can actually traverse a town and like speak to like a merchant. And like, hey, it's cool that there's like you can follow cats around to help you navigate around town. Cool that you can actually like accept a quest and like this is what you do for that quest. You give some footage of like this is what like traversal looks like on the way of like doing that quest. There's like these safe havens that you can do of like where you can just like craft things and make healing items and rest there. And it's like just kind of like basic structural game info of just like this is what the gameplay loop and cycle is of this game. And like that's kind of what the game's needed for like frankly almost a year now.
Yeah, because a lot of the framework about the isekai story and things like that we kind of got super early on and didn't need to be like delved into too much, but that's kind of all they really focused on for like a half year worth of marketing, and it just got boring. They focused a little bit on magic, which was admittedly kind of cool, but you kind of had to like peel back the layers to get to it. Where now it feels like they finally said like, all right, here's the game. You can finally start to glean like what you actually do in it, how it actually might play, how it might be organized, how you might progress through it. So yeah, to state it bluntly, like you said, just shut them up a little bit. There is still like narration talking about what you're seeing here, but it's more it's less diegetic and more just in trailer format. It's a little bit more just basic, but I think that's kind of what this game needed. Is just what is a gameplay trailer for Forspoken? Well, here it is.
Yeah,
I feel like this might be a little bit mean, but I think the best thing that's happened for Forspoken in the last like week has just been that new gameplay and like footage of like High on Life that has dialogue that's even like more cringeworthy than Forspoken. So everyone's just like, you know what? It could be worse.
Yeah, and like there's actually like really cool things about the game that like outside of combat, like the traversal of like casting a spell to like surf on water in the game. Like that looks sick, you know. Traversal looks really fun in the game. So it's just I'm hoping like once I get, you know, I sit down with it, I actually play it for myself, like I have an enjoyable time and like because like there's so much of this game like I want to like it, but they're like the marketing has done a poor job at making me want to like it. So finally it's just like okay, the at least Forspoken got like at least one good showing in the last year.
And one of the last major gameplay trailers that we wanted to highlight here near the start of the podcast was for the first time in I believe a while, we finally got some new footage for next year's Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes. Obviously, we had Eiyuden Chronicles Rising released not too long ago that served as kind of like the prelude. We've kind of gone over the podcast about what exactly that game is anyways, but publisher 505 Games, as part of their Gamescom marketing, released a new trailer for Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes, and if you've played Eiyuden Chronicles Rising, there are a few characters you'll recognize. So as someone who has not played Suikoden, which is obviously what this game is ostensibly a spiritual successor for, I'll hand it off to Adam. Like when you watch this Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes, this new footage from Gamescom this year, is this kind of what you expected? This is what you want to see?
Yeah, I mean, this trailer is only like a minute long with a bunch of logos, also taking up trailer time. But it looks good. You know, I like sprites. I feel like, you know, whenever we see sprite games, like that just kind of draws my eyes to it.
Sprites are good.
Yeah, it's so the characters that we saw like you see a handful of characters. The two that are from Rising are Garou, who is the mercenary kangaroo with the broadsword, as well as Milor, who is the magical girl. And so you see them in battle, so they are party members. One thing that was interesting is I believe the trailer said there are over 100 playable characters. And I'm like, wait, over 100 playable?
Yeah, that's what surprised me too.
Because Suikoden has 108, but only like only like 50 of them are playable, or 60 maybe. Like half of them you kind of recruit and have different, in Suikoden I mean, they have like different functions that they do, but they're not like, anyways, I don't know what they mean by playable in this sense. But they also showed a shark man who is very cool. He's a shark with a
so we have an
ball and
alligator
chain.
man, we have a shark man, we have a kangaroo man.
Are you sure they're not in the DC universe?
He's not Killer Shark or whoever the DC one is, but probably the most interesting part about the trailer is that the battle scenes, it's a turn-based battle system, but it's got like this dynamic camera that seems to like kind of swing around the battlefield. It's it's kind of hard to get a grasp of it from a trailer, but it looks like as you change from like character to character doing different attacks, the camera will kind of swing around, adds a little bit of a dynamic flair to the turn-based battles. So a lot of the effects are cool from what we see. The trailer shows various attacks from the characters. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's not a whole lot more we can glean from it in terms of like, I don't really know what the game's story is. I'm sure if you like devour the Kickstarter, you can find it, but I'm just like, I'll just see that as it comes.
Yeah, I think I don't know if the Steam page for it is new, but there was like a basic description on the Steam page that I put over on the news post as well. But I mean, I'm with you. Like, story premise doesn't really matter as much to me as like I'll just see it in the game if I've already.
Yeah, I don't need to read a summary of it. I'll just I'll get it as it comes.
Yeah, if you go to the Kickstarter page, there's like monthly updates are up to 47. So like if you're up on that, you could be up to date on that and get like little piecemeal updates on all the characters and all the art if you want. But yeah, I'm kind of with you, Adam, where I'm just like, well, I don't even have like the nostalgia for Suikoden. I should play that, but just. Well, I liked Rising enough as like a preamble to the world. It'll be cool to kind of see some characters carry forward from that. I like sprites as well. It's kind of got an HD 2D type style without specifically being in that engine, quote unquote. So I think this looks really neat, and I'm excited to see it next year.
I was gonna say, they don't look like marionettes like the Rising anymore. The character actually moves kind of smooth.
It's worth mentioning that the developer is totally different.
Oh.
Yeah. Rising was developed by like Natsume Atari, where this is being developed by Rabbit and Bear. So
I guess that probably explains why there was a huge difference in quality.
Yeah, the Rising was always meant to be just a side project. It's like it was more like it was a nice like Kickstarter like stretch goal because like we were so successful that we want to like kind of give back to people for helping us reach that. And this
and it was reflected in the price too.
Yeah. And this is looking like hopefully, a good Kickstarter, a good successful Kickstarter, and hopefully everyone's like, hopefully like expectations are met, and hopefully that like people who like really pitched into the Kickstarter for like goods like get them in a timely manner as well, which is always the tricky thing with Kickstarters. On top of like just delivering the product is like delivering back to the people who financially supported you.
Like
along the way.
My experience with Kickstarter is like as long as the creators are transparent about what they're doing, it's usually the project goes pretty well. But a lot of times they don't really come off as transparent and always try to pull some shady deal in the back doors and just ruins the entire project altogether. And it happens mostly way more often.
More often than not. It's unfortunately, but more on that later because this is not the last time we're going to be talking about a Kickstarter project.
Well, I was thinking I was actually going to go into that topic next, just because it seems like we're in the mode. Alrighty, so this probably could have been, if I wasn't neo-biased, the first thing in the podcast in the news section, and this is basically another set of Kickstarter projects that are ostensibly spiritual successors to very popular JRPG series from yesteryear. So, who here are fans of the Wild Arms and or Shadow Hearts series? Because
yeah, probably I'm gonna guess it's Chow, Josh, and me.
Hey, I've played one Shadow Hearts game. It was the third one that no one likes, but I've played it.
The third one is underrated. I think the third one is actually decent.
It's all right, but it's not as good as the first two.
It was in the shadow of 2 though, so that's the
it's functionally identical to 2, just with worse characters.
Yeah,
but it's literally identical, like kind of almost like disturbingly so. But,
all right, so the core creators behind both the Wild Arms series and the Shadow Hearts series have teamed up to launch a double Kickstarter aimed at creating spiritual successors for each of these. Here are the titles. For the Wild Arms developers, they have released a Kickstarter for a new project titled Armed Fantasia.
This is
So
an
this-
upcoming Kickstarter. These
It launches
Kickstarters are
on
not live yet.
Monday.
Yeah.
So by the time you listen to this, it might be launched. But yeah, the Kickstarter will open on August 29th. We're recording this podcast a few days ahead of that. The funding goal for the Kickstarter campaign for both is $750,000 US. So for Armed Fantasia, this is the Wild Arms spiritual successor. It includes Wild Arms creator Akifumi Kaneko, character designer Tomomi Sasaki, composer Michiko Naruke. And this is the one you wanted to highlight, right, Adam? You really like the composer Michiko?
Yeah, Naruke is awesome.
And then also
2, 3, and half of 4.
So basically this is, I see in the credits of all these creators here, Wild Arms 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and XF. So this is like truly
Pretty much all of them.
getting the gang back together for Wild Arms, for Armed Fantasia. And we'll go into details maybe more later. But the second game for the Shadow Hearts spiritual successor, the title is Penny Blood. So, and again, similar to the Wild Arms Armed Fantasia, for Penny Blood, which is the Shadow Hearts, they've got the creator Matsuho Machida, the character designer Miyako Kato, and the composer Yoshitaki Hirota. So basically all veterans of the Shadow Hearts trilogy. As a kind of a side note, former Capcom composer Akari Kaida, who did Breath of Fire, has also jumped on to the project to help compose for this Penny Blood, which is the Shadow Hearts spiritual successor.
I think that's actually a very valid composer to add. He not from the Shadow Hearts series, but I think his jazz style, or her jazz style, excuse me, I believe, I think would be very suitable for this game set in the 1920s.
Yeah, Breath of Fire 3 really nailed that, so.
Breath of Fire 3 has the best soundtrack of the series, in my opinion.
And that's the
it's
composer
really
that's
good.
jumping on to Penny Blood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'd like to be clear once again, because this is such a weird concept. This is that they're dubbing this as a double Kickstarter campaign that's opening at August 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific. And they're seeking a funding goal of $750,000 US dollars to fund both game projects.
This is pretty common and obvious speculation, I think, but it seems like the funding is almost more like a proof of concept, where it's like, hey, if we can show a potential publisher that people are interested in this, and we can raise, let's just say, shy of $1 million. I don't remember how much Eiyuden raised, but if they can raise that much, which definitely isn't enough to cover the whole cost, they can maybe sign on a publisher and maybe get more funding.
There's no way they can make a game like that.
I believe one of the interviews, so we didn't get a chance to interview any of the staff. We were just very busy last week. Like we said, last week was kind of nuts. But there are interviews at RPG Fan, at Gamatsu, and they talk about a little bit about this, where they saw the Eiyuden success. These two creators, I guess, just literally kind of bumped into each other, and from there just sort of decided, hey, let's do this. But I have a feeling the funding amount is more just sort of an initial investment in terms of proving to someone else, hey, there's an audience for this, and there's no way that can be the whole funding for the entire game.
No way.
So,
there's some things about it that kind of point to this as well, because both I forgot, I don't, at least for Famitsu, they did get a gameplay clips of the prototypes of these games. So you see some gameplay footage already of the prototypes of Armed Fantasia and then Penny Blood, and what I don't know if the video itself is a proof of concept or it's actually a playable prototype build. That info isn't surfacing, but I think it's very important for them when the Kickstarter page goes live to be very transparent about hey, we have proof of concept videos or playable prototypes right now of these games, and we really and the purpose of this Kickstarter campaign is if we reach this goal, it that will let us go through with a publisher agreement. Because what certainly is happening is the publisher needs to see public interest, and then once they reach a certain threshold, which is the 750,000, then that's where they'll be okay, now we're really going to give you the real funding to see these projects get through. And they have to be transparent about that. I don't know if that obviously contract stuff might not allow them to share the publisher that they're in talks with, but at least very much be transparent about we are in talks with a publisher, because you cannot give people the impression that 750,000 is funding both of these games. That's just
I should mention, I looked up I know that the exchange rate now is different than it was a few years ago, clearly, but Eiyuden raised in yen, it's 481 million yen, which is something like $3 million. something like that. I don't know what the
Yeah.
exchange rate was. So that in terms of the Eiyuden Chronicle, that raised about 3 million, give or take.
So yeah, ballpark
for one
on that.
game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm fans of both these games. I know some people are like Josh, aren't very like eager to support a Kickstarter unless maybe they are very, very, very upfront about what they are using the funding for. I'll just throw the minimum amount to get a code that if this is successful, they can throw it my way whenever they finish the game. Which I don't know, 4 years, 5 years, whatever.
So if it's successful.
Svaddle, let's focus on Armed Fantasia because both of these were incorporated like concept art and screenshots for these games. When you look at the provided screenshots for Armed Fantasia, is this kind of what in your mind's eye a modern Wild Arms might look like? Like when you see these,
it's the same character designer as 5, which is the last like 3D Wild Arms. So it looks similar to 5 with maybe a more modern, or definitely more modern, like cell shading sort of style. So I think visually it looks like Wild Arms, more so 5 than the earlier ones, but considering the character designer, that checks out.
Now I'm gonna ask a very naive question here because I have not played Wild Arms, so I'm not going to read through the whole press release. We do have up on the site. There is a very lengthy press release that details both games, but in the press release for the Armed Fantasia, they say that you take on the role of a group of adventurers called Pathfinders. It is a turn-based combat system, though they mention that it is kind of like rapid-paced, and that they utilize powerful arms, Aether Reaction Maximizers, as their weaponry. Isn't ARM like what they use in Wild Arms as well, the same acronym? Or
Yep.
I'm just.
Well, I don't know if the acronym is exactly the same. I don't remember, but I literally just opened the website. The website for this game was up earlier today, but it seems like it's down now. I wonder if it went up or like prematurely before the Kickstarter. Anyways, it had a couple of details that weren't in the press release, but they specifically mentioned they wanted to focus on like a big world map, like classic styled world map. They wanted to focus on like exploration and puzzly dungeons, which Wild Arms is known for. Especially the earlier Wild Arms games, you got a lot of like, it was almost Zelda-ish in terms of getting a dungeon item that you don't do anything with it in battle or combat or anything like that. It's literally just to help you move around dungeons and do puzzles and things like that.
Yeah, they call them gadgets.
Yeah. Let me pull up the press release here. They went into a little bit more detail on the website.
Yeah, I have it
down.
Yeah, so dungeon exploration.
Yeah, leaf solve puzzles, crossing the land, high-speed vehicles, which that all sounds like Wild Arms to me. Because one of Wild Arms' biggest strengths is I think the dungeons. Like I said, kind of Zelda-ish. They put a lot of focus on it. Not like dungeon crawler, like DRPG dungeons, but more like Zelda-ish, kind of top-down Zelda-ish dungeons.
There's more like puzzle elements to it where you're trying to like, oh yeah, this block needs to go over there, and I could use a bomb to explode this part.
All right,
it's not like modern dungeon game design where it's just like a pretty narrow path with branching paths and dead ends, and then just go back to the main path. It's more involved.
Yeah.
People gave
that sounds right. The only thing is that I saw some people saying this on Twitter, like, show me the hexes.
There you go.
Which may not make any sense to someone like Ryan, but there are no hexes.
Hey,
doesn't seem like it.
So what are hexes? Okay, first let me guess. I'm going to guess it's like a grid that
4 and 5 system.
Yeah, Wild Arms 4 and 5, as well as XF in a way, had hexes that you moved around on a grid. So there's like a positioning element in battle. Based on the prototype they showed, it looks like more traditional turn-based.
More like 1, 2,
like the first 3. I mean, the prototype, obviously things can change a lot when this game is actually like a real thing. But it seemed to have some sort of like break combo system in place where you can somehow like jump around turns and whatnot. So it's more than just, my turn, your turn. But, there are no hexes is what I'm getting at.
If you want more legally distinct Wild Arms flavor to it, you'll see a little subtitle, Armed Fantasia to the End of the Wilderness. Guess what was the track title to the very first Wild Arms opening?
The End of the Wilderness, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
the fact that they still call them Arms
also have they also mentioned the world map, and Wild Arms game also have like, it's like a classic, JRPG type of world map with a little bit of like, I don't want to say puzzles, but there's a bit of like actual like exploration on the world map in terms of like finding maybe like a location that is optional, but actually requires a little bit of navigation to get to on the world map around mountains or rivers or forests or what have you.
You basically have to spam this the square button.
In some of them.
Yeah, you basically got to spam them, and you'll be like a little radar sonar effect will come in, and you're trying to find the location. But sometimes, if you forgot to talk to the right person,
They don't show up.
it will not show up.
Yep.
So it's very annoying.
And that's mostly Wild Arms 3, I think. 5 had it a little bit too, but I specifically remember it in 3.
I had it after 2. It was implemented in 2, then it was really
2 and
annoying.
3.
Maybe you
4
forgot to talk to one extra person and it won't show up. You know where to go, but the place is not showing up.
Yeah, 4 did not actually have a world map. I think that was the only one that didn't. It was like just a menu map. But anyways, let's talk about Penny Blood. So this one, I don't think the website was up for this one at all yet. I'm assuming they'll go up. Well, it's got like a splash page, but nothing else on it yet. So this one is obviously, it looks like a cell shaded Shadow Hearts game. I'm not the only person who thought this, because I saw people on Twitter also thinking this. It's reminiscent of the JoJo anime openings, the older ones, which is kind of like a CG stylized, cell shaded type of art style, which I think is actually apt, really, for the setting and the.
They have a really good, they have a really distinct look to this game already. So
it looks unique.
What they went with it.
I don't think this one's had like a full trailer like the other one, but there's at least a clip that you can find where the main character's name is Matthew? He's
Matthew Farrell.
Yeah,
but not Roger Bacon guy. No,
Roger Bacon. But he's a private detective in New York in the 1920s, which I think Shadow Hearts was set in like the 1910s, like it was right around
around that time period. Yeah.
So it's basically set in the same period, or maybe just a little bit afterwards. He's a private detective, and he has accursed powers that allows him to fuse to hunt down monsters. So there's kind of like this occult element to it. But the gameplay I've seen shows him like punching, like literally just like going on a zombie.
Yeah, like the little gameplay tip that shows the concept and prototype of the battle system is like, he's just like using his fists and legs to like just like beat up on a demon, and like right as he's about to like punch them, like a little thing shows up that kind of looks like the Judgment Ring from Shadow Hearts, but it's more of a Judgment Lie.
I've never had the Judgment Ring, even though that timing on that thing is very difficult.
It is so funny when that little thing popped up in that clip. It's like, all right, I get you, I'm in. This is I assume like that fusion thing will be like Yuri's demonize mechanic in Shadow Hearts as well, and you can just like turn into like a demon, which is a big thing in the Shadow Hearts games. And that's the only like character that we know of besides like the lady in the splash art. All we really know is of Matthew Farrell. But it looks, it is shaping out like the concept and like initial screenshots of these games and like the small bits of gameplay. Like they're both very solid concepts. Like they are definitely like, these are the types of games that fans want, and the creators and the staff know what what people want. I guess we haven't really seen like proper successors to these games. I'd say like there may have been like several indie titles that like went for it a little bit, but not in this capacity.
Should I play Shadow Hearts Covenant? Do I have to play the first one?
I'd say you have to play the first one for Shadow Hearts.
Even though it's a prequel technically to one, it's technically
like I don't think Covenant makes a lot of sense, but if you don't like kind of have the background for Shadow Hearts 1. And I think I don't know. I don't think the gameplay for Shadow Hearts 1 has aged all that well, but the atmosphere is still sort of unmatched. Like you still don't have that like favorite like gothic horror RPG that the first one had.
I don't know if it's a fair comparison to. I was thinking like Valkyrie Profile with how the Shadow Hearts plot kind of went. I don't know.
Nah, it's nowhere near both are very, very different.
Yeah, that's why I said I don't think it's fair.
Yeah, I replayed the first Shadow Hearts like not that long ago, several years ago, and I was like, man, I miss RPGs like this.
Do you remember the accessory that you get if you could do like the combo system really good?
I forgot the name of it, but I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, where it could just like auto does it for you or something.
Yeah, So
Oh
I
my
mean,
god.
you know, best of luck, and you know, if you're planning to support them, just know that the Kickstarter, as of the time of this recording, is not live yet. It should be up by, like I said, August 29th, by 9 a.m. PS Pacific. And just, you know, take a look at the Kickstarter page, make sure what you're getting yourself into, because as you know, as optimistic as I want to be for these games, like I want a success story like Eiyuden, there have definitely been like
Horror
Kickstarters,
stories.
a lot of like Unsung Story, for example. Where's that? And then there's also like some weird, some of that early weird Kickstarter era, like with Concept doing Mighty Number Nine, and then like as the Mighty Number Nine Kickstarter was going, Concept did another separate Kickstarter, Red Ash.
That
And like
didn't
they
go
did
too
it,
well.
yeah, they did that in the middle, and then Red Ash never like manifested whatsoever. So not to say that like these aren't doomed projects. Like I want to be hopeful that they're gonna go just fine. But just, you know, be wary and be aware of what you're getting yourself into. You're not don't treat these as pre-orders for like a game, you know? Like it's just like just toss it in and hope something comes out of it, and don't be too bummed if it doesn't. That's just kind of the best I can hope for. Don't think of these as like it's guaranteed that like I'm gonna get the game of my dreams from it.
Yeah, it's not what you're expecting. It's
Yeah.
like when you order. I don't know. I have a terrible experience doing the Mighty Number Nine Kickstarter, but luckily I pulled out at the last day because Infinity said something stupid, and I was like, okay, I'm coming out of this thing,
Mhm.
and the shit he pulled, it was like, damn, it was totally 180, man. It's just like when you look at the project and you see the concept art, and then the product looks nothing like the concept art, and you're like, I thought you were going with like 2D. It's like, no, that was just a concept art,
Yeah,
guys.
well, like even all the gameplay clips we're talking about, all the screenshots they were showing, these are not reflective of the final product that you're gonna get.
Like the
The-
character's probably gonna look completely different in the final
Like,
product.
right? Like we don't know. Like nothing is set in stone here. Nothing about these assets or any of these screenshots or these gameplay clips that say these are in the final product. They are not representative of the final product. So just be aware.
The last thing I'll note on this, at least from my perspective, is that I thought that the very end of this press release was kind of interesting, but maybe like a bit silly. It's basically details on this double Kickstarter thing. They go into several paragraphs about this combo meter, how basically like pledges for one game will contribute to a specific game stretch goal meter, but it will also contribute to the shared combo meter, which will fill up with support from both games. And then the combo meter will unlock content for both games. So basically, even if you support one, you incidentally support the other. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know.
Exactly.
Exactly.
What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. I just hope that like momentum of like pledges from people who are like, you know, excited about it will like
I didn't even get to the
kind
good part
of
yet.
yeah,
Where it's just like
go for it.
campaign followers will see 5
Yeah.
different social media goals that will basically relate to an attack or special move. There'll be monsters that will require a certain number of hits before being defeated, which will clear a stretch goal and upgrade the rewards. That are just like, so they're like gamifying this like Kickstarter thing where it's like, I guess we'll see if it works. I mean, we've already
it's
seen
it's
like,
worked. Yeah, it's worked for a lot of past Kickstarter projects. Like even though I know James still feels burned about the Wonderful 101 one, that's a Kickstarter that comes to mind when it comes to gamifying like the
Yeah.
project. Like they did a lot of that shit.
for me, it's
I love how one of the goals for that Kickstarter was, oh, if you participate in this, Kamiya will block you, or if you're already blocked, one block, so he can block you again.
So
for
it's
me,
just-
it wasn't Wonderful 101 or Mighty Number 9. It was Unsung Story. It's like one I backed and like, oh yeah, that released in early access on Steam and has like 20 reviews at mixed. Like, oh, how great.
Yeah. So you know, like when initially reading this, like I was like, what if like one of the games meets their goal, not the other? So it's like, I don't know, weird like, you know, what if scenario that probably won't happen, but
This combo stuff, I honestly, I read like the first like 4 words, and I'm like, I'm done. I don't care.
I don't care. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like, obviously once these Kickstarters go live, what other, if any other details or media companies that, which we can follow up on, are getting the fact that they've already shown so much and they obviously very clearly have a ton of support from the original creators on board. I think there are reasons to be optimistic, but you know, with Kickstarter, there's never a sure thing. So, you know, deferring to Josh's advice about this isn't a pre-order. This is, you know, this is all in the works and plans, and they don't even have a publisher yet. So just keep that in mind. I guess with that announcement out of the way, I will just transition to another announcement. Something that is kind of interesting because last week, or is it last week or 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Disgaea creator Sohei Nikawa resigning from Nippon Ichi. We talked about how he had been there for over 2 decades. We didn't know like what the future of the Disgaea series was because Disgaea 6 tried a new art style, tried a new framework, and didn't set the world on fire. But despite all that like fear mongering unintentionally, we did get an announcement of Disgaea 7 this week. So I don't know if this was expected. I don't know if this was planned to coincide with the resignation of Nikawa, but we got a new trailer for Disgaea 7. We even got a release date. It is releasing on January 26th in Japan for PlayStation 4 and 5 and Nintendo Switch. We got a new trailer for it, about 2 minutes. It does still use the same like art style of Disgaea 6, so like kind of like the 3D chibi cel shaded look. So basically, for Disgaea fans, it seems like the series is going to just continue on as normal. We've got Disgaea 7 on the way and not too long.
This is important to note with like people who didn't like Disgaea 6's transition to 3D, Disgaea 7 will still carry on Disgaea 6's aesthetic of like it's still not sprites, it's gonna be 3D moving forward, and that's just the reality.
There's just a couple other things I want to note too, but yeah, it's 3D going forward for sure. I think this announcement seemed to catch some people by surprise, and I think one reason why is that Disgaea 4 was 2011, Disgaea 5 was 2015, so 4 years.
Well, that's not quite fair because there was Disgaea D2 between 4 and 5.
True, but between Disgaea 5 and Disgaea 6 was 2015 to 2021. I think these are English dates, so like 6 years, and then just 2 years later, we're already on Disgaea 7. So basically, the distance between 6 and 7 is much shorter than 5 and 6. So it kind of felt sudden.
Also, another thing
did
too,
like catch me off guard. But the one thing I remember them saying as one of the reasons they switched to 3D was just to make it easier to develop them quicker. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that it would be like, well, we already have the engine 3D models. Obviously, with the way Disgaea works, a lot of those 3D models for like the common units are just going to be straight up reused. So,
but also the other thing is, interestingly, like Disgaea 6, if you don't remember, it was announced in a Nintendo Direct, like a partner Direct, and basically it wasn't released simultaneously, but it was announced simultaneously, English and Japanese. Although there was a weird oddity that the English version was Switch only at the time. But it was announced at the same time. Here, no English announcement yet. None. Gematsu reached out to NIS America basically saying, hey, do you have anything to announce? And they basically said, we don't. Not yet. So, no, this is Japanese only announcement for now for Disgaea 7.
Yeah, obviously, I imagine they're going to have an English release down the road. That they'd be crazy not to. So, I mean, it'll come eventually. It's just we don't know yet if it's like going to be a weird Nintendo deal again, where we get.
I was going to wonder about that. Disgaea 6's weird like Switch English exclusivity thing.
Yeah, and that didn't work out well. It sucked.
And I feel like almost everything about Disgaea 6 localization was a bit of a trash fire because. Like newer versions of not Disgaea, of NIS's games on Switch using the same engine, like Boken Meshi, apparently the performance and resolution is a lot better on Switch. But Disgaea 6 was either you played it at a like higher resolution at 20 FPS, or you played it at like potato resolution at 30 or something like that.
Yeah, hopefully, I hope when it comes to us, hopefully it comes to like just PlayStation and PC simultaneously on first release. No,
I think the thing that's even worse though is that we finally got Disgaea 6 on like PS4, PS5, and PC. The PS4 version $70.
Really? Holy shit!
Yeah, the MSRP is $70 because it's supposed to be the complete edition, so it comes with all the DLC. And I don't think let me check the PlayStation Store, because the physical copy, at least, there's no version that's like just the base price.
I guess another important thing to note as well, because of the Nikawa retiring news, like this is still like the development of this game is still very much involved. Like when Famitsu published their latest issue this past week, focusing on Disgaea 7, like the interview was with Nikawa, so he was, obviously very involved with the development of this. So now it's kind of like moving the goalpost back. It's like, okay, now what's the future of the Disgaea series after this game? So it's kind of a weird like how they decided to like light up those news bits of like, hey, I'm retiring. By the way, also here's this guy I gave you that you didn't know of that is coming out, and then I'm
All right.
PC out.
So I did double check, and the way it works on the PlayStation Store is that when you buy the PS5 version of Disgaea 6 complete, you also get the PS4 version and vice versa. There is no separate PS4 SKU, so it's just $70 on PS4 regardless of where you buy it, at least MSRP.
That's man, that Sony is really good at making people just pay more. You know,
More on that
cost
And
later.
if they're suck it up, then well, yeah, that's what they're gonna do to people.
But yeah, I mean, as far as like Disgaea 7 itself, like for new features, they have this new feature where there's like gigantic, like big ass enemies like that are off the board, like just almost like titans, like looking over like the game tiles. So like one of your characters, I don't know if it's like if you have more than one character, but at least one of your characters could like hop out of the game board and like turn into like a giant as well, looking over the game board and maybe fighting like the foe who's gigantic as well, which is kind of crazy when you look at it. Another new feature they're showing is item reincarnation. So characters are not the only ones who get reincarnated. You can now level up an item, and when it reaches max, you can reincarnate it and have like a shitload of like new properties. They were touting like, here's like, if you like reincarnate a weapon, maybe you can eat it now after reincarnation. It's like, okay, cool. Um, and then one of the new features that really caught my eye, which is kind of weird, is they have this online PvP system now, but it's not real time PvP. It's like you fight AI versions of like real person's teams, like what you would find like in Princess Connect, for example. Um, and they have like a ranking leaderboard off of that, and then you don't. I don't think you can directly play those like PvP matches. They're automated through like the AI settings that you give your team versus the other player's AI settings. So it's kind of doubling down on that like AI tweaking system that was in Disgaea 6, where it's kind of like a more involved whatever that system was from FF12. I already forgot. But it's basically just like tweaking like very minuscule like AI things like if
Gambit system.
yeah, gambit system. So like you're just like basically putting your if then statements against the enemy player's if then statements and seeing which one will come out on top, factoring in character levels, equipment, and all that stuff. So it looks crazy. That's kind of the system that's like oddly the one that's like makes me uh interested in the most, because it's like, okay, you're actually like kind of pushed to like um change up like your character synergy and lineups to like properly like respond to like other enemy lineups that other people give to their teams. So that's kind of that's kind of a neat twist to it all. But I wonder if it'll rectify a lot of like the automated systems that people had with Disgaea 6, because a common complaint of Disgaea 6 for people, understandably, is like I can just like turn on the game and like turn on auto battle, and it'll just play itself and just have it grind endlessly for me, and like I don't even have to play the game. It's like, what's the point then? It's a complaint I've heard like more than a handful of times for 6. So I wonder if 7 will, kind of try to make fixes to that.
If I remember right, Paige in her review for Disgaea 6 spoke extensively about auto battle, about basically like the stages weren't complex enough. Like auto battle can be a nice quality of life for like grinding, but then when it can just be used to clear the whole game, it just felt like kind of meaningless. Like I'm not engaged.
As someone that didn't play Disgaea 6, apparently a bunch of people on Twitter said that some of the new info for Disgaea 7 sounds like it's deliberately making it so that you just can't auto battle the entire thing. More like it's something you can build up to for like if you want to grind, it's like you have to use some sort of currency to do auto battle or something, which I think is a way of handling it or something. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll pivot to a couple other titles that got some new gameplay details, not in the forms of trailers, but just in the forms of like newsletters or blog posts. The first one here is Tactics Ogre Reborn. Obviously, this game had a long like preamble to when it was like leaked to finally when it was officially announced, and when like what the new version of Tactics Ogre has compared to the PSP or the prior versions of the game. However, the new press release that we got from Square Enix for the upcoming Tactics Ogre Reborn seems to spend more time acting basically being delivering information for players that are new to the game about the tarot card system, about how just battles and victory conditions work, about how the units work and things like that, and not specifically about changes to the Reborn edition. So I don't know if Adam or Josh saw anything in this specific press release for this details about the upcoming Tactics Ogre Reborn, but it seems just more about basically like a 101 for this strategy RPG about how everything works and things like that. And we already kind of talked about how the leveling system is now unit based instead of class based and things like that. But this just kind of goes into like a high level detail about the elements and how those work and how the what's the name of like the clock that you can turn back and forth for selecting different paths. What's the official name of that?
Yeah, I forgot the official name of that. I know what you're talking about.
They just call it a branching narrative, but I know it has a name within the game as well.
Yeah.
You mean the World Tarot?
Yeah, World Tarot. Yeah. So Adam, I don't know if we saw like basically I'm looking over this press release for the Tactics Ogre, but it's covering the game more just holistically in general, not specifically what's new about this version, which is still kind of nice. But for those who are looking to revisit the game, this is kind of information they're already aware of.
Well, the one thing, the press release mentioned this, but also Yatsumi Matsuno posted he's the creator of Ivalice, basically, posted a little Twitter clip of this where I mentioned actually in a previous podcast when this was announced that I don't think the change to unit-based leveling really addressed the leveling problem, but they talk about a new mechanic that does, or I think at least mitigates it quite a lot, and that's where if you have a unit that is far lower level than like your average, then the amount of EXP they get is like exponentially like boosted. So they catch up very fast.
Got serious on Twitter about this. He's like, "All right, you motherfuckers, I'm gonna bust out not only just a Japanese tweet, I'm gonna bust out an English tweet for you assholes." You know, he showed out the power leveling system, and then like you just saw like level, like he said, this is an extreme example, but let's say like a level 1 person going completing like an average level 50 stage, and then he just got shot of like 23 levels after that stage, you know.
And someone mentioned to me that the Famitsu interview also talked about, or maybe Matsuno mentioned this later, there's also like charms and whatnot you can equip that also raise EXP gain and things like that.
Yeah, they mentioned that. Mm-hmm.
So it seems like that's definitely something they are aware of and try to address. And that personally makes me feel a lot better about the unit-based system.
Same here.
Like the thing I was kind of just concerned about is you're going through the game, your characters are like level 40, and then you recruit a new unit and they're level 10, and it's just like, oh boy. But
yeah,
they announced fast.
Yeah, when they announced like it's going back to units because the original Tactics Ogre had like units, it's like okay, that system was like in some ways a little more tedious than Let Us Cling Together. So and that's how I was like.
Chow said before that in the original versions that are not in English, that's how it was.
Yeah.
Or I guess.
Well, it wasn't English from the PlayStation 1, if you count that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyways, yeah. So I'm happy to hear that. Otherwise, I don't know if that leveling thing I mentioned this before is like the one thing about Tactics Ogre I do not like. If that implementation of that new system is good, like this might be like
this is the best game.
Yeah. I just maybe need some mods to adjust the pixel smoothing a bit. That's about it. Hopefully that comes out pretty soon.
Look, that's what the PC version is for. If anything else, you know, people are gonna make sure. And I kind of that kind of excites me too because like people are gonna like introduce mods. I'm sure people want that One Vision mod. I assume I'm sure people want to implement that into at least the PC version of this game as well. So
I know some people don't like in the World Tarot when you like jump to a different path that the enemies do scale up to you, meaning you can't just blitz through like your second path because like nothing like a New Game Plus. I get where they're coming from, but personally, I think I'm fine with the level scaling. Usually you outpace them anyway because of your equipment and skills, but I don't think they've mentioned anything about changing that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Like you beat the game, you're level 40. If you go back to chapter 1 and take the other path, all the enemies you're fighting are also going to be around level 40, so you can't just blitz right through it. I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with it.
But they haven't said anything about if they're going to be adjusting how that works at all. I don't think.
Yeah, strangely enough, like the whole new like stuff that talk about Tactics Ogre this week was like giving a lot of lore behind like the gods of the game, and like I don't remember them ever giving this much lore to like the god like the elemental gods.
I
Like
don't know much about them in the original as well.
yeah, exactly. So I
You
was
just
like,
do like a tarot thing. It's like you want to be aligned with this god, but I don't know anything about them.
yeah, and like that's a big thing that like people get hung up like to newcomers in the game when you're making your character. Like one of the final things you do when you make your character is like the god like they'll be asking you like questions, and then like depending on how you answer questions, that like determines your stat allocation, which is basically do you want your main character to be more of like a frontliner or a mage type essentially.
I don't remember. To be honest, I don't remember this. I mean, you do
In
it
the
once and then you
original
play a
game,
100-hour game.
Yeah, yeah.
like in the
You
original game, you pick 4 choices for each god. It's like, what's it? You want the goddess of water to be assigned with honor, glory, freedom, or something like that, and you pick all the words, and then you start to select which god you want to be aligned to, and it doesn't tell you what stat they're good for, so you're just picking shit at random.
Yep. But yeah, but even the actual thing itself, like I don't know if it's new. I can't imagine it's new, but it's like they explain about like the lore of it, behind each god, like way more in detail than I've ever heard of in this
Yeah.
game. I was like,
Now,
I guess.
this is actually not new information, but they revealed this when they announced it, when they talked about the switch to unit-based leveling. If we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the mechanics here, when you leveled up a unit, the stats they get will depend on the class they are.
Yes.
So, like, if you're a mage type unit and you level up, I imagine your magic based abilities will go up more than like your defense or whatever.
Mhm.
And they actually specifically say that this way you can sort of like tailor your characters to how you want. So for people who like get really, really deep into like the min maxing, I can already imagine it. Like, oh, take a character like Ravnus and level them up 10 times as a dragoon, and then 4 times as an archer, and then 6 times as something else to get the right stat allocation. You probably don't need to do that, but I can definitely see people doing that if they want to be optimal. So, yeah.
The Tactics Ogre Reborn is another one of those November releases. Let me remind myself of the release date of that. It is November 11th of this year. The other Square Enix game that we got some details from in the form of a Japanese blog post that was then followed up by some English details was for September's release of Valkyrie Elysium. And this was basically detailing 3 main things. It was detailing the weapon system, how you can have 2 different weapon types equipped at a time, about the divine arts, which are basically spells that you can find throughout the world, and then some other details about characters and things like the soul chain, which is like a hookshot that you can use to traverse across the world. We also got some voice actors. I don't know if this information is new, but we did get with some of the new characters that were announced here, some artwork as well as their English and Japanese seiyus. I will say that as someone that plays most games primarily in English, for these characters that were revealed here, which are Christoph and Taika, like I recognize the Japanese seiyus more than the English voice actors. Like I don't recognize these English voice actors' name, but I do recognize Maya Uchida and Sayori Hayami. I don't know what they played, but I recognize the names. So it'd be interesting to see if these English voice actors are some fresh blood into the pool of VAs.
I actually looked up Safia Ingar, who is the voice of Taika, one of the Einherjar. I guess she lives in London, but she is like Indian heritage, so got like an Indian accent, maybe. I'm not sure. So yeah, they revealed more Einherjar. I think we know of like 3 or 4 or 5 Einherjar based on the last update in this one. They also introduced a character who is not an Einherjar. It's hard to say. So that means he's not dead. His name is Armand, and they don't really say a whole lot about him, but he's looking for something, but he doesn't know what. Ooh, so I have a feeling this character is important because he's not dead. Because if they're an Einherjar, they're just more of a mechanic almost, right? And they have like a tragic story and how they died.
yeah, that's just like a feature of Einherjar. Yeah, a tragic story, but I'm just going to use it.
It's worth noting that they stress that there's going to be more of a focus on the Einherjar in the story this time around.
Yeah. Like we mentioned before, in Valkyrie Profile 1, they each have a vignette, and they're very good. In Valkyrie Profile 2, they literally are just weapons you pick up in the ground. Literally. But yeah, I'm sort of curious about this Armand character, because he's just like, if you're not dead, then why are you here? So
get on that. But yeah, got a lot of screenshots showing all the different showing the weapon types, like a straight sword, a spear, a rapier, a double-edged sword, spear, about the different divine arts, which they say they're like spells that you literally can find like in chests or from scrolls. So, oh no, the scrolls are found in chests. So yeah, you literally just collect these.
Obviously, a lot of the combat stuff is totally different. Excuse me.
There
totally
was a Twitter account that like scrapes back end PSN data, and they found a logo for Valkyrie Elysium demo that they haven't announced yet. So if it's anything like Dio Field and Live Alive, there's probably gonna be a demo for this game that you could maybe transfer to the full game.
It'll probably be a TGS thing or something. If the game runs well on PS5, I'll get it there. But if I think that I want to wait, I'll just wait for the PC version.
I think I'm reviewing this. I don't remember. I have to.
You are set to review it.
Oh
no! Brush up on your Norse mythology.
I know.
Oh yeah, learn how to pronounce Einherjar. Practice that one.
Einherjar. I can do it. There you go. I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this game had obviously a kind of a really rough initial showing, but I feel like it's presented itself better every time it's reappeared. I don't know if that's Boiled Frog or if it's actually looked better. Maybe it helps that it
definitely looked better. Like the visuals I remember for the first one was like really muddy with the textures and like just the level of detail, and then like every like piece of footage since then has looked significantly better and cleaner.
And then, yeah, this is a late September release, pretty much a month away. September 29th. And then this isn't really an announcement. This is more reporting on some reporting from Bloomberg. We talked about how there were development issues and like an indefinite hiatus for the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake. So we talked about how it was given to Asper, who has been known for doing the ports of some of the older Star Wars games, and that giving them the helm of a new remake seemed a bit strange. Well, based on this Bloomberg digging, it seems like that the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake has shifted to Saber Interactive. Now, Saber is actually like, I remember Adam did some digging on this, like a surprisingly big publisher with like several employees in multiple studios. Did you like do some digging here and you kind of thought like you try to figure out like who specifically might have been taking the helm?
The weird thing about Saber Interactive is that Saber Interactive is like an operating group within Embracer that has several studios underneath them, not named Saber. For example, Zen Studios. But they also have several studios under them that are just like Saber, I think Belgium is one, or Belarus, Saber Belarus, I mean, which might be the studio they went to. Bloomberg's reporting just says an Eastern European studio, and you can maybe, narrow it down from there. But I think Saber Interactive has a few thousand people, and, that's across all of their studios. So they are actually the parent company of Aspyr, who was the original developer of this remake. So it seems like they kind of almost like took the toys away. Like, okay, we'll take it from here. And then they gave it to someone else, another one of their studios to develop it. The report also mentions that from an anonymous source that basically the game has been in development for about 2 years and it's still at least 2 years away. So
yeah, I remember when I did the original news post, like reading the Bloomberg reporting that they were under the impression that the game would be ready in 3 years for a ground up remake with a studio that has never done like a project of this scale. And I feel bad for I feel bad for the original developers that were working on it, because it sounds like they had like a steady idea of like what reasonably it would take. Like they said, it'd probably be 5 years. They were confident in what they had to show. And it sounds like almost that maybe it wasn't so much them. It was like expectations levied on them by people that just did not understand the situation they were putting them in.
Yep.
I do like that they state that it seems they don't expect that this will have any effect on like the scheduling for the game. And if I remember right, Jason Schreier, who was obviously an editor at Bloomberg, basically said, like, I have a bridge to sell you if you think that just transitioning development studios isn't going to incur some delays. But I guess you could argue, like, what is a delay if it doesn't have a release window? It's kind of ends up being like your shift of perspective or how you define whether something delayed is or not. Basically, as soon as this game was announced, it's like, all right, we'll see it in 4, 5, 6 years. I'm not like expecting it to be anywhere close to ready or even shown for a while now. And this is just going to push that out even further.
I feel like you don't even announce this, right? Like I feel like you just let this go behind the scenes, and then like you should have announced it like when there's something tangible ready. I don't know why you would go ahead like announce this like so far out, like we have started development on this. It's like, okay, great.
It was probably Sony because they wanted that announcement. They said, "Oh, it's a PS5 console exclusive."
Maybe.
All right, so I think that kind of covers us for a lot of major announcements and details of existing games. Now, there are still several more because Gamescom was a lot. It was a lot. But as we go forward from here, we might just spend a little bit more time on each individual item and just kind of go through each in turn. Before we do that, though, something that we did kind of hint at or teased at or whatever is talking about Sony, I guess. They kind of announced something that doesn't affect U.S. consumers, but it's a bit strange and a bit unprecedented. And that is that they have announced officially that they are increasing the price of the PS5 console in several markets, including Japan and Canada, not including the U.S., due to the global economic environment, including high inflation rates. So they, in their blog post, just detailed what the new MSRP is for both the disc and digital versions of the PS5 in Europe, UK, Japan, China, Australia, and others. One of the more interesting outcomes of this announcement, which in and of itself is very strange and unprecedented.
I mean, before we get into this, it is worth noting that these price increases are not trivial, by the way. Like Europe, for example, it is up from like an additional 150 euros. So it goes, so like the PS5 digital edition in Europe is now, it goes from 399.99 euros to 449.99 euros.
Not to mention in Japan, which I can understand how big of a gap it is in Japan as someone that's been like keeping an eye on the yen to USD exchange rate over the last couple of months. The yen's just taken a beating. Like it's been taking a beating for a while. So it's like, it sucks. Arguably you could say that Sony did not need to do this, considering they have record profits and all that, but it's like,
it's such a bad look. Like even after like the news came out, like Microsoft and Nintendo immediately were like, "No, we're not doing that." So Sony's like, "Okay." So like for example, the PS5 with the Blu-ray disc drive, the original price is 49,980 yen. Now it's going up to 54,980 yen. So it's getting about a 5,000 yen increase off of that over Canada. Sorry, Chow. I think you already have a PS5, Chow. You're good.
I don't have one. They're never on sale. You can never find them. And now if I could find them, now it's probably $100 more.
Okay. So which edition of PS5 did you want to get, Chow? The one with or without the disc drive?
Of course with a disc drive. What are you, insane?
I know.
I have a digital one.
So it's going up just 20 CAD for you. It's 629 CAD originally. Now it's going up to 649.
I think how it went was that they already adjusted from the inflation before, so they didn't have to adjust too much from it. I think that's how it goes.
Yeah,
I can't confirm completely because I remember they jack up the price before due to our currency not being worth all that much. So
yeah, so I think the biggest increase is for euros because like everything else doesn't have that as big of an increase from what I'm seeing here.
No, I mean like if you look at the disc version for the Japanese model, it's like 10,000 yen.
That's 5,000 yen for the disc. Yeah.
Are you sure? Because that's not the price increase I saw.
I'm seeing it from an IGN story when they're comparing prices for Japan, the PS5 with the Ultra HD Blu-ray disc drive. It's 49,980 yen originally, and the new price is 54,980 yen. That's from their story. So you can go research that if you want, but that's
either way, it's a bad PR move. I mean, considered how it goes, I feel like this is a time for Microsoft to turn things around the table. This is a good opportunity for them.
Microsoft in general just had like a really quiet year.
It's really interesting because Xbox has had multiple weeks where they've sold over 10,000 units in Japan, and I think last week they had around 10,000 sold. So I wonder if Microsoft might not just try shipping more Xboxes to Japan in the coming weeks to see if they can maybe ride the wave a bit with the price increase.
Okay, this is weird. Now I'm seeing where you're coming from, James. So I guess the IGN story must have. Oh, this is including tax. So you see in the Japan one for the PlayStation blog. It does say 60,478 yen for Japan, but that's including tax. And I guess for some reason the IGN one either has a typo or didn't include tax for their amount. Interesting. Okay. So I don't know. Must have been a typo.
Yeah.
So accompanying this announcement straight from Sony about increasing the MSRP of the console in several markets, Games Radar put together an article that I think is a bit strange, but maybe there's something here worth talking about. And then that is obviously related to the impending release of Final Fantasy 16, which is currently only listed as a PlayStation 5 exclusive, not a PlayStation 5 console exclusive. The only confirmed platform of any type is PlayStation 5. Now, Games Radar released an article called "Japanese Players Are Begging Final Fantasy 16 on Steam After the PS5 Price Hike." However, they really don't point to a whole lot. They just talk about how FF16 is trending on Japan, and then it links to a few tweets about people wishing that it was on Steam.
Well, it wasn't even that, because I looked at those tweets and it wasn't so much them like begging for it on PC. It was more like them speculating, I wonder when it's going to come. And like the first tweet I think they linked, it was just like, so it's probably going to be a PS5 console exclusive for 6 months, and then it'll be an EGS exclusive for a year after that.
I mean, we've kind of seen that precedent with Remake. And so maybe like this Games Radar article in itself isn't, that interesting, but it is kind of interesting just to compare like the state of Final Fantasy 16's releasing in versus like Final Fantasy 15. And this is something that the site boss Alex Donaldson's pretty passionate about. He actually is predicting that Final Fantasy 16 just won't do well due to the fact that it's kind of locked as this console exclusive for a while. And we kind of saw that with the limited growth in the sales numbers of Final Fantasy VII Remake, where now that it's a console exclusive, and on top of that, we're having this, the console is still not easy to find and will be more, prohibitively, maybe not prohibitively expensive, but the hurdle is higher now. It's just, it kind of depends. It just kind of brings some questions on like, I wonder like what Square Enix is getting out of these console exclusivity deals. We already saw them like double or triple dip with Remake, and it seems like that must have been successful for them because all signs seem to be pointing to the fact that they're going to try at least a similar tact again with Final Fantasy 16. And a few people are kind of, I guess, calling that out ahead of time, wishing like, well, it's probably coming to PC, but when and how and where. We can look at 7 Remake as kind of precedent. Will they follow that tact exactly? We don't know. So just kind of just some speculation.
Yeah.
I don't even think the 7 Remake is that successful, in my opinion. They could have hit way higher sales numbers than that. But, I just think that this exclusivity is a terrible deal, a terrible idea.
Well, 7 Remake also had some extenuating circumstances of being like multiple parts and things like that. Go ahead, James.
Definitely seems like, at least with the exclusivity deals that Square has been taking with Final Fantasy, it just, even if like, I don't understand the thought process, because from the outside looking in, it just sounds like, to me, and I've definitely seen some other people like say this, it seems like, oh, so you don't have enough confidence in the game to sell, so you need to take a deal to make sure that you recoup costs at a bare
regardless
minimum. Yeah, and it's like, and if Final Fantasy is like your biggest brand, why would you take deals that very specifically limit the scope of how well that brand can grow? It's like, especially after like Elden Ring and seeing how big that's grown as a totally new IP.
Can you imagine if Elden Ring was like had an exclusivity deal with someone?
Like Elden Ring's like has it's not guaranteed, but there's like a legitimate shot that it will outsell this year's Call of Duty when push comes to shove, and that's insane. And like Final Fantasy like 16 is never going to get anywhere close to that just because of the limits of how it's being released. Like
the main point of comparison will be like comparing 16 and 15 as very different release philosophies. Where 15 came on PC later, but it was, multi-platform from the start. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. And you got a feel for like, I was browsing Japanese Twitter off of like this news story from Games Radar, and like seeing like some of the comments, and like one of the comments is like, I guess I'm not buying my kid a Switch because I need to save up for a PS5. It's like, that sucks. That sucks.
I just wonder how Yoshi P can answer these questions in a good way. They're like, it's like, hey, what do you think of releasing your game on a console that just
And the Yoshipi's
for
like, it's
price
not.
gouging people?
Yeah, Yoshipi's like, it's not my decision to make.
Yeah, and like there's been all that speculation. I'm not sure if they made official comments on whether they were originally deciding whether or not it was going to be on PS4, but it seems like that was originally like a consideration. And now it's like, I wonder if they're regretting deciding to make it a true PS5 next gen exclusive.
I mean, there's still time to announce a PC version, I guess. So quite a while. So I hope to see it not just on PS5 for the sake of this game, man. It's a shame. It's a shame. I think like I kind of like sort of having flashbacks to like Fantasia gated behind Apple Arcade. It's like so many people will never fucking play that game because
I
behind
keep
Apple Arcade.
Yeah, and even if they do have Apple like products, I've met a bunch of people where it's like I tell them, "Look, Fantasia's so good. You have an iPhone, you should play it." It's like, "Oh, I don't want to play it on a phone." Or even
Yeah.
if they're willing to play games on their phone, it's like, "Oh, can I buy it?" And it's like, "No, you have to pay for a subscription."
Yeah, and that doesn't feel good. So I get it. I get it. But yeah, sorry for the confusion earlier between the Japanese prices. On
Yeah,
the
you were just
PlayStation.
reporting IGN.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Okay, and
like,
that actually happened in
yeah.
another context earlier this week about the Wild Arms follow up with Armed Fantasia. Sometimes we can only report on the information that's given to us, or that we can source from other people that are usually reputable, like IGN. The press release named the composer from Wild Arms as Noriyasu Umatsu instead of Noriyasu Agamatsu. And like was like, oh, we were just going by what was on the press release. Like,
and I was unfamiliar with Agematsu. Like, I love Wild Arms 5 and 6 or XF's soundtracks. I was just like, well, they're spelling it differently, so I'm going to defer to them.
Yeah, like we don't normally go into the habit of, all right, let me check if your press
Yeah, I'm
release
gonna
is
correct the
correct.
press
Yeah, so
That's
you
what
can
I'm
only go
saying.
on the information we've got available, and we'll correct it if we find out that there was an error.
But
So after
And once I was
bottom
explained, at
line,
least they were like, ah, that
Naruke
makes
and
sense.
both those composers I'm very fond of. So even if the game is garbage, which hopefully is not, at least the music will be good.
So we're going to go now into some of the game announcements and trailers that came out of Gamescom stuff, mostly out of Gamescom opening night live, Keeley's stream, but some from some other publisher streams as well. I'll bin these two together. These are two open world action RPGs. Well, actually, I guess we don't know if one of them is action RPGs. They're both two open world RPGs that were announced during opening night live. The first one is Where Winds Meet. This is a new action RPG that takes place during the 10 Kingdoms era of Chinese history from developer Everstone Studio. This trailer actually shows a fair amount of gameplay, which is actually pretty neat for an introductory trailer for a game. And the other announced open world RPG from opening night live was for a game called Wyrdsong. Now, unlike Where Winds Meet, Wyrdsong is pretty much just a cinematic teaser trailer that doesn't give us much in the way of specific details. So both
the
of these,
the Wyrdsong announcement was almost not even trying to hide it. It was more of a recruitment trailer. Like, hey, we want to make this game. You want to join us?
Yeah, so the Wyrdsong announcement, the one tied to that announcement was that it's a new independent developer called Something Wicked Games, so self-publishing as of this moment. But yeah, I don't know if we had any feedback about these two new. Both these games seem like they're pretty far out. No, obviously release window at all. Just two things to kind of put on the list to look forward to.
Yeah, the Where Winds Meet game looks really really cool. Like it's another focus on Chinese martial arts. This is like an open world action adventure RPG.
And I tried looking into this a little bit more, but the developer behind Where Winds Meet, what's the studio's name?
It's Everstone Studio.
Yeah, and they say they're in partnership with NetEase, and like I'm not sure if this is like an actual like NetEase studio, or just some other arrangement that they have. But it's interesting because we've talked about this before with NetEase moving more into like console games more than mobile, and is this just one of those? You know, this is a game that they have a studio making. Right now, it's only announced for PC. It's not announced for any consoles, but that's still pretty different from NetEase's usual, mobile offerings. So
wonder when we're going to see that Negoshi project.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, this is very Wuxia inspired. I love seeing that like there's a lot more games development now that adopting that Wuxia style or Wuxia inspiration. So it's not just Sword and Fairy. So that, I mean, this is, I hope this really does well. This definitely is catches the eye. I'm not too familiar with the Ten Kingdoms era in Chinese history. Are you, Chao?
It's the Tang era, which is I think a lot of people only talks about the early days and not really the later days, and this is supposed to be the later days, right?
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because the early days is more like about the was it the Li family, which are where the prince start killing each other, trying to take over the throne. Then after
Hmm.
that, he is the greatest king ever lived, apparently.
All
So
I remember is like things just like kind of tumbled like during that era. Like it was like kind of that like dynasties were like very short lived because of like succession during
yes,
that
they're
era.
really short lived, but this is actually one of the longer lasting dynasties. So
Okay,
it's actually like known to be like the golden era at one point.
interesting.
But yeah,
Yeah,
it's at the end of the dynasty. I don't know how it falls, but it's always the same shit. A rebellion because of shitty treatment from the government, and boom, rebellion, and we're gone.
yeah. They mentioned in the press release for this game is that it's set during the beginning of the Northern Song Dynasty.
Mm.
So just kind of giving a time period there. But yeah, I don't think we know much more than that, especially like just how it plays and everything. So just want to keep an eye on. Well, see where it goes. And then for the other one that I wrote up for, this was a really funny, just like anecdote for Wyrdsong. Is like the YouTube for the Game Awards misspelled the game's name as Wyrdsong because the logo for the game you can't tell if it's a D or an O. When you see the logo, it's like it could go either way. Honestly,
They misspelled it in two different spots, so it's almost like I guess that's how it is. It was like in the trailer title and in the description. Like I guess it's called Wyrdsong. Like no, it's not.
yeah, and I was like, oh, it's fucking good. And like I saw a Japanese news outlet like also call it Wyrdsong. So I was like, is it Wyrdsong? And it's like, oh, we got press release. It's actually Wyrdsong. I'm like, oh, okay, great. So this project, as we mentioned from Something Wicked Games, like like there are like big RPG veterans helming it. Like it's founded by James Gardner, who is known for as the lead producer for the both expansions of Oblivion's Knights of the Nine and then Shivering Isles expansions. Also did work on Skyrim as well, and then he was senior producer there. And then you also have Charles Staples on it, who previously worked on Alpha Protocol as a designer, level design
Yeah.
lead on the South Park: The Stick of Truth, and then most recently design director for The Outer Worlds. And then you'll see a lot of the kind of the staff behind who's working at Something Wicked Games on their site. But as for actual gameplay, nothing like this is very much just the early days of development. This studio was barely founded earlier this year, and so this game will be quite a while out.
It's always kind of cool
Yeah.
to see independent developers, though, in an era where we seem like we have just mega corps just absorbing acquisitions being like the topic du jour. So kind of say like, yeah, we're going a different route. We're going to make our own game under our own terms, which is kind of fun and neat to see. It means it probably will be a long ways out before we see more details from this, but kind of cool that they have a pitch. They got a stage to
Yeah.
present it on, and I'm guessing there are aspiring developers that would love to work on it.
Speaking of NetEase, like NetEase is the involved with Something Wicked Games again because they got initial seed funding from NetEase of 13.2 whatever is. I'm not familiar with that currency, but that's NetEase is also investing in this company's future in some capacity.
The other two new titles that were announced during Gamescom this last week are kind of tangentially linked. One of which is kind of a rebranding of a game that was announced a while ago, and one of which is a new announcement. So, in order, I will just say that Lords of the Fallen 2 was announced several years ago, back in like 2018, as a follow-up to like 2014's Lord of the Fallen, which was developed by Deck 13. Lords of the Fallen 2, however, was had a lot of trouble development about changing developers. Kind of went AWOL for several years. It then, however, has resurfaced as now just called The Lords of the Fallen. So I hate that just naming scheme in general, where you have a sequel and you just put the in front. Well, I guess it's The Lords now. I don't know. So The Lords of the Fallen it's basically kind of like a rebrand revitalization of Lords of the Fallen 2, and we got a new announcement trailer for this game. and it's set to be announced next year as to be announced for 2023. And the other title that is kind of like tangentially linked to this is what Deck 13's new actual title is, with a similarly named action RPG called Atlas Fallen, which also had a world premiere trailer at Gamescom opening night live. So these two games,
Atlas Fallen.
is it the no?
No,
I almost believed you. All right, so yeah, so I hope I get this right, Adam. You're good at the details, so let me know if I get this wrong. These games have different developers and different publishers. Atlas Fallen is being developed by Deck 13 and published by Focus Entertainment, which is formerly Focus Home Interactive. The Lords of the Fallen is being developed by CI Games and Hexworks, but is based on a sequel or a follow-up to a game that was developed by Deck 13. So these two games basically are linked.
Hexworks is a CI Games studio, so it's kind of like publishing their own game.
All right, so basically Deck 13 made the original Lords of the Fallen. Now they're making Atlas Fallen, and Lords of the Fallen is being followed up by Hexworks. And both these games got announcement trailers at Gamescom. So
do we know if CI Games or Hexworks, like if they've worked on like a project before? Like if
Hexworks is new.
Okay.
I know CI Games is like really known for like the Sniper Elite series, which is sort of
okay.
And they've done a couple of other like publishing deals. Like there was this Eldest Souls like pixel art indie game that they did. But this specific studio making this game, they literally like made the studio for this game, or they formed the studio.
Did they mention like any like veterans of the original game like on that studio or anything like that?
I'll have to pull up the years old announcement to see. I don't remember. I believe they're based in Spain.
Okay, yeah, I've seen the press release. It says Hexworks is led by executive producer Saul Gascon, who's worked on Dead by Daylight and Payday 2, and creative director Cesar Vertosu. Sorry for if I mispronounced any of the names here. Who worked on Shadow the Tomb Raider and Assassin's Creed Origins, and they were founded in 2020 with over 75 internal developers.
Oh, I guess they have studios in both Spain as well as Romania, Bucharest. Yeah, I'm in Romania. So, yeah.
It is funny seeing the key features for the Lords of the Fallen, because they say this will be over 5 times larger than the original game, and they'll have uninterrupted online co-op.
This is just a small minor thing, but this is amusing to me. So like I think like a year and a half ago, they basically confirmed that they were working on this game, and they're like, here's the logo for Lords of the Fallen 2, like the teaser, and then 18 months later it's like, actually we're not calling it that, and also the logo font's totally different now. So
I do like that. I watched this trailer, but I didn't like parse it in my brain. This is like 3 minutes of CG, which is fine. It's just that normally for a CG trailer, it's not quite that long, unless you're a Final Fantasy expansion, I guess. But
also, that's probably the least fitting music for like a trailer.
Yeah, the fucking OST for his or BGM for that trailer is really something.
Because at the very bottom of their press release, they say, look forward to a full gameplay reveal of Lords of the Fallen later this year. Like, oh yeah, I guess this trailer really doesn't show any gameplay. Which is, I'm the sort of person where if this is a re-reveal of a game, I think CG is okay. It's just almost more than I expected. Like, oh, if it's 3 minutes long, it's probably got some gameplay in it. Nope. But I don't know. It's got kind of your typical, very like, if you imagine what a Dark Souls like game would look like with a dark fantasy motif, you can imagine it in your brain.
I mean,
it's flashy, stylish.
Think about it, right? When you're thinking about the very first Lords of the Fallen, that was one of the earliest Souls-like games. That was like that was the marketing thing for that game. It's like, it looks like Dark Souls.
I played it, and my friend bought it for me. I was like playing it. It's like, hey, this is a Dark Souls knockoff.
And no one really thought at the time that like Souls knockoffs were going to be like a new genre in itself, right? It was like for the original Lords of the Fallen, it's like it felt like a one-off thing. It's like, oh, okay, people are gonna like take a jab at it, but no one could have expected that like it would like just turn into like a new style of game emerging.
And I'm totally okay with that. Like, it's just a heuristic to help bundle. Like, some people, I'm sure, cringe or wince when they hear Souls-like or even Metroidvania or things like that. But I think it's just a useful tool to be like, if I can describe this game in like a couple words to at least give you like a grounding point to say like this is what this game is like, and then at that point you can start listing exceptions or how it varies or how it's different, rather than just saying like third person action game, with meaningful combat and like non-linear exploration, like Souls. Yeah, like Souls like. There you go. Yeah. So the other game here is the game that Deck 13 is working on, Atlas Fallen. This one has a more sci-fi punk aesthetic to it. So it looks kind of like fantasy, but there is just it seems like a little bit more modern tech in terms of like robots and some of the equipment and things used like that. Also a CG trailer, also about 3 minutes long. So I guess these things are more similar than I thought. But I think that this one just has a more interesting, more unique aesthetic to it. Also kind of just slated for 2023.
Not to take a jab at the game, but it reminds me of like a Western Monster Hunter. And then I reminded of like a Monster Hunter movie. That when I kind of watched parts of it.
It does kind of look like Monster Hunter movie. It has like the same like it takes place in a desert environment, the trailer, and it's got like the similar like color grading to it. But I still think it looks
oversized
neat.
Weapons. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's got like giant axes and like a giant two-handed blade.
And we know that the Deck 13 has a pretty competent like track record for like past works, right? Like
yeah, so I played both of the Surge games, and they're both good games. I didn't think either were great, but they're competent, complete, full, well-made games. Mm-hmm. So they have more of a pedigree behind them than Hexworks does, by fact. So I'm interested to see what they can pull off here.
Wait, did Deck 13 do the Surge games too?
Yeah, so they did Lord of the Fallen. This is kind of funny. They did Lord of the Fallen, then they kind of branched off to do the Surge and the Surge 2, and now they're making Atlas Fallen. Whereas CI Games has taken that same amount of time to try to get someone to make a Lord of the Fallen 2. After Deck 13 left. They've made two other games in the meantime. So, yeah.
We'll just make our own studio. Mm-hmm. But no, I think Atlas Fallen, I think between the two, I think it just has a more unique aesthetic to it, where the other one is very clearly Souls derivative. And I don't say that with a ton of negative connotation. It's just very clear what its inspiration is. Where Atlas Fallen at least takes the framework and does something at least seemingly different with it. Oh, and by the way, Atlas Fallen is announced for next-gen consoles and PC for next year. Again, we don't have any direct gameplay trailers for it, but unlike the Lords of the Fallen, they don't explicitly say when we will expect to see it next, but I'm sure if it's slated to release next year, it won't be too long. Between all of the 4 games that we've covered that have come out of the Gamescom announcements, Atlas Fallen is the one that I think I'm the most interested in. I think it just has the most unique look to it.
I agree, largely just because I played other games in this or from the developer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really interested to see once you get like HUD elements and just like what the players do in Atlas Fallen, I think is the most interesting out of those. I do want to see more of Wyrdsong meet though, so they're kind of both very close to each other on like interest level, because the other two are just Wyrdsong is just so far off that it's like we said, it's more of a recruitment campaign than like a game so far, and Lords of the Fallen 2 is just like I feel like I know I feel like I already know what the game's gonna be, right? It's like it's gonna be a Souls-like. When Lords of the Fallen was like, it was its own thing, but it's still very much a Souls-like, and I don't know if I'm like that interested.
It's a Souls-like with the same theming and environment and similar art as Souls, where it's like, what does it provide that's different? It's not clear yet based on the initial CG trailer.
The Souls-like I'm interested in is involves Pinocchio out of all things. So
more on that later. So we got some game trailers from Gamescom Opening Night Live and other publishers for existing games. And sure, we'll do that one next. We got a new trailer for the upcoming another Souls-like, Lies of P. So this is like the steampunky Souls-like that is an interpretation of the story of Pinocchio. And actually, right before this podcast, I was watching this gameplay reveal. We got some gameplay like from some alpha teaser like late last year, around when this game, I guess it was announced in the middle of last year, and then we got a little bit of teaser late in November 2021. So this is our first time seeing the game since then. A decent amount of gameplay shown here from Gamescom. And I was saying, if someone didn't tell me that this was inspired by the story of Pinocchio. It doesn't really wear it on its face. You can kind of see it, like with some of the weapons shown, like unlike some of the other gameplay trailers shown, this one actually does show UI elements, which I do appreciate. And there's like, I think I saw like he had a weapon equipped that was, or at least like an item that was called like puppet strings. You can see a lot of like mechanical like limbs on both the character and the enemies. So it has some of that sort of like marionette, steampunky, Victorian era vibes. But it still doesn't like explicitly scream Pinocchio to me. But I guess that's kind of the point, potentially.
Yeah, like there are several outlets too that like recorded like demo gameplay from Gamescom, like of like just what you do in the Gamescom demo, and like it very much looks like if you told me this is like you said, like if this was Pinocchio, I'd be like it's a Bloodborne, like, you know, it's very much the primary inspiration through and through with this game is Bloodborne, and it's not afraid to hide it, and that's okay, you know. It looks pretty fun. It has like it's Bloodborne-esque with its own sort of its own ideas, and I'm interested to kind of see and learn and play more. You know,
So it's a Bloodborne like.
Yeah, pretty much, and I'm okay with that.
It's funny because I wasn't super interested in this game until like they showed the trailer during opening night live, and it's like, huh, like this feels a bit mean, but a lot of Souls likes that aren't just like from Team Ninja or like from Software, you look at them and it's like you can kind of tell that they're gonna be a bit of a janky experience. And I look at the trailer for Lies of P and it's like either it's really good editing or like some of those like animations look really nice and like it looks polished. It's like, you know what? Sure, I'm down to give this a shot.
And maybe it's worth mentioning that Liza P is being developed by Round 8 Studio. What's the publisher's name? Neowiz. So they're Korean. It's like a Korean developed Souls-like based on Pinocchio. Their previous game was Bless Unleashed, which did not like review very well. So I remember when this was first announced, I actually kind of poked fun at it, like, oh, it's from the developers who brought you Bless Unleashed, that, you know, mega hit game. But from what they've shown, it looks at least interesting. So.
Yeah, like when you reminded me of that, just I was like, oh fuck, it's the Bless Unleashed devs, but hopefully it comes together, you know.
I heard like things about that game until later on they found something wrong with like their monetization or something.
Well, at least it's not MMO, right? So I mean,
there's Bless the MMO, and then there's Bless Unleashed, which was like not really an MMO. It was online, but it was very.
Okay, I was thinking about the.
It was not marketed well. It was not clear. Yeah, Bless Online, which also didn't set the world on fire.
That one actually got removed from Steam.
Yeah, it tells you a lot.
Anyways, another takeaway I had from this trailer: a lot of people seem to think that Pinocchio is cute and attractive.
He's good looking.
Yeah.
They have a long nose.
Lad. Maybe you never know. If Pinocchio decides to talk in this game, we might see the nose get long.
Mm-hmm.
You know yet though.
A couple other trailers that were shown during Gamescom. This one, I don't want to be like disparaging or like set the stage by, and I'll just say it. System Shock Remake, which has been in development for seemingly forever. I didn't know that this was going to be shown at Gamescom, but I just remember seeing in the chat, like, oh, look, another trailer for System Shock. Still no release window, which feels kind of like rude or mean, but it's kind of where that game is now. Like,
There's been a demo on Steam for System Shock Remake for like almost 2 years at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so yeah, we just got a trailer. It just got a trailer at like the E3 time period. Obviously, not actually E3, but like a few months ago too. So it's just kind of like, okay.
Like we don't really need to see more of this game. Like people like know what this game looks like, and you've had a playable demo out for the longest time. The only thing left for this game that you can really like get people's interest in is a release date. It's like people want to play this game, and it's just like where is it actually in development? You know, at this point it feels so long overdue.
Started as a Kickstarter campaign in 2016, so that's kind of how we're looking. And that feels like rude or mean of me to be like, all right, guys, release date. Because, developing games is hard.
Yeah, for sure.
But like they could at least frame this as like specifically showing like a certain portion of gameplay or a certain environment. But it doesn't seem like it's just well themed. It's just like, here's another minute and 50 seconds, or not even that once you include logos. Here's another 90 seconds of footage from the game in development. It's like, okay, that's neat, I suppose.
Yeah, like I guess if you're gonna give us like another look at this game without a release date, like at least something meatier than something more, show at least show like gameplay with HUD elements and like a new section on like what the player is doing, like how you've updated the visuals of that certain area. No, but at this point, it's just like
Now, last they mentioned that this game is supposed to release this year. I don't know if that's still the case, but
yeah.
then when they gave it, they said 2022 at least at one point.
Not that they don't even mention like it's coming this year anymore. It's just like,
they maybe kind of silently delayed it.
They could also just take the other route where they do like one of the trailers we're going to talk about later is one of the what is it, the Star Ocean Divine Force mission reports, which are like 6-7 minute like primers on how the game works. And we also saw a lot of those for Soul Hackers 2 before it released. Like having like more of a 5-minute, 6-minute trailer where it actually says like, here are the systems at play, here's how the equipment works or perks or something. And maybe that wouldn't work on a Gamescom live stage for a longer trailer like that, but I do think that something like that would be more inherently interesting rather than
I agree at all, but also like the unlike Star Ocean the Divine Force and like Soul Hackers 2, those are actual new games and not like reboots or remakes of like previous games. You know, with System Shock, it's like there's only so much you can show that will be like new, because at a certain point you still want to keep it System Shock.
Mm-hmm. We got a trailer for an action RPG, Stray Blade. So this game, I had to remind myself, was announced late last year, and then we got a combat trailer and a private beta announcement earlier this year. We got a new gameplay trailer at Gamescom, at the Future Game Show. And this trailer, unlike some of the other trailers for different action RPGs that we saw, actually shows a fair amount of gameplay with HUD elements, with UI elements.
There's a theme.
There's a what?
A theme. This trailer is all about like crafting equipment.
Yeah, and they show like some of the, like the customization on the coloring and things like that, and some of the environments that they can be used in, how they show in different lightings. This is to be announced for next year. This is being published by 505 Games. Point Blank Games is the developer. I don't remember if this is their debut project or not.
This game's got sort of that like cartoony, almost like World of Warcraft sort of stylized art.
Which I'm actually really okay with, because there's so many other games that we've already talked about that go for that either hyper real or at least like artistically gritty art style. We're having something that is deliberately more colorful and cartoony while still being like mature is kind of a hard wedge to fit in. But what I see here actually looks, I don't know, it's visually appealing to me.
The two things that stick out to me is the skill tree makes my head feel things when I look at the skill tree for this game, because it's not quite Path of Exile, but it is complex enough that like it's scratching some part of my brain. And second, it's the running animation for this game is funny because it has like the character like holds his sword like over the shoulder horizontally, and as he's moving around, he keeps that sword in that position, but still has his hand on the handle as well. So it's kind of like funky the way he like runs around with like the sword over his like behind his neck throughout the game, which is kind of amusing.
Well, he doesn't like trip and cut his own neck.
Yeah, pretty much. It is. I didn't mention this, but it is. At least it is. It meshes better than like what they showed off like the Harvestella gameplay demo, where like that in the Harvestella demo, like the legs feel like they're moving independent of the upper body. So like it feels like the upper body is just like in like stasis, like just like always moving still, while the lower body is like kind of walking independently from the upper body movements. It reminds me of like the small D-walkers for the Metal Gear series, which is like mostly leg.
One of the other games that we got a gameplay trailer for, which does have more of a gritty, grounded art style, is Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon, which is another game that is slated to come out this year, at least according to or early access this year, I suppose. But we got a new trailer for this. This is from Awaken Realms, which is an independent studio self-publishing this. It was originally announced late last year. Is it in early access yet? No, it doesn't have an early access release date yet, but they're planning to be in early access by the end of this year.
They released another game that was like initially supposed to be like a mode, but they made it its own game, like Tainted Grail Conquest, I think. It's like a roguelike mode. They just made it their own game. And that's out. That's actually just out. You can buy it.
I tried to remember what this game was. I like skimmed through the trailer. I'm like, oh, this is the one that I said Elder Scrolls at Home, and I was like,
Yeah, when this stream was happening, for those of us who watch these streams, you might be following along in a couple different chats, and you posted like, this looks like Elder Scrolls at Home, like we have Elder Scrolls at Home, and then in another chat, someone just put out, they just announced Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion.
It's not to poke fun at the game, but it's like it's the first thing you think of when you see this game.
Like, specifically, they have like an NPC talking to you, first person. It looks like an Elder Scrolls game. The NPC is like not really like right in your face. He's kind of standing far away. He's like stiff as a board, just kind of talking. Like looks like a Oblivion NPC. So
I also didn't realize.
I thought it was amusing that two people made the exact same joke at the same time, and now I'll always associate this game with Oblivion. Sorry. So,
but the fact that this is first person, at least primarily, I don't know if they said it's wholly first person, but that's it. For better or worse, that's like the only thing that helps me remember what this game is. Like out of all these different action RPGs that have been announced or have already been announced and getting new details, like, oh, what is this one again? Oh, it's the first person one. It's the Elder Scrolls.
I actually just looked up this Tainted Grail Conquest game on Steam. It's got 5,000 reviews. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a lot. Holy shit! When did that come out?
Like last year.
Oh my god.
Oh. So yeah, again, that's like the roguelike game kind of set in the same world, I guess. It's like a card builder. So yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, and just a little more footage of Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon. I don't know. I enjoyed Skyrim, so I'll take Oblivion at Home. Yeah, so I guess it's. But again, if it's early access this year, I like to wait until it's fully released. Which we have seen that some things can live in early access for years at a time. So who knows when we'll actually see this get to 1.0. And I think the last title from Gamescom that we got a gameplay trailer for is another game in early access, and this is Wizardry: The 5 Ordeals. It's been in early access for a few months now, I think since earlier this year or late last year. The main announcement at Gamescom is that now it's still in early access, but now has full English language support as of in the last week. So Wizardry: The 5 Ordeals was already playable, but now you can play it with full. But yeah, I guess this game originally released in Japan in 2006, and then the PC, it was as a Japanese-only PC title, and then was ported over to Steam recently. Still in early access, which seems to me like, is that what early access is for? Is that what it means? I'm not 100% sure.
I mean, yeah, I mean that's part of it, right? Because like if you want to launch in 1.0, you want to give off like the best first impression. So this makes sense. I mean, when this game initially launched in early access last December, it did have like some UI elements in English, but like not any of like the story scenarios or story dialogue.
Well, actually, I can go to the Steam page and answer my question. They say, why early access? Mm-hmm. While the game has all the features of the 2006 version and more, they still need to check that the user-created scenarios and editor service work properly, brush up the game and make adjustments, and make improvements based on community feedback, which I think is kind of fun. Which and they in their little FAQ on the Steam page, they say that it will be in early access for approximately a year and a half. Of course, they give caveats and say it might be longer or shorter because they can't predict the future. But now available in English as well, still in early access, but available to play up on Steam.
Yeah, for people who don't like, I guess always my one caveat with Wizardry games is like know what you're getting into. Like this is one of those games that you actually have publish an official online manual using the Steam guide feature. Like I would heavily recommend like reading that before playing the game because it is Wizardry. The Wizardry series is like infamous for its difficulty and like kind of have to understand the game system going in. Or else you're
do not make this your first dungeon RPG.
No, definitely not. That's the big.
You're literally tortured everywhere you go.
Yeah, Wizardry is known for being a tough dungeon crawler RPG series, and 5 Ordeals it seems to be a traditional Wizardry experience, which means it's probably going to be hard as balls. So know that going in. But other than that, that's like all good news. I really want to get into it, but like I need to find the time to do it because I know it's going to be an investment when I decide to pick it up. Because I do miss Wizardry. It's just like you have to learn the language of Wizardry going in.
I think the last thing we have listed that had some major gameplay footage was something that we mentioned earlier, and that is a new mission report video for the upcoming game Star Ocean: The Divine Force. So the last mission report, if you remember, it's specifically talked about the DUMA system, like the backpack jetpacks that the characters have. And on top of that, they've also been releasing these short little character trailers. Well, in mission report 3, they talk mostly about the game's villains, but on top of that, they also introduced that Star Ocean: The Divine Force will have a 7th playable character. We got the character bio trailers for the first 4 characters. We were still waiting on getting ones for the last 2, which were Midas and Nina. But however, during this mission report 3, they talk about the Virian race, which is like an ancient race of beings that has lived on this on the planet for, I guess they say, since time immemorial. And one of these characters, named Malkia, will end up being the 7th playable character of the game. And I had to kind of watch this twice because apparently one of this race's like abilities is that they have like stretchy limbs that she uses in combat. So like a combination of like Luffy or Miss Marvel. Is it Miss Marvel?
You mean Mr. Fantastic?
Mr. Marvel. Or
No.
Mr. Fantastic.
Like who's Kamala Khan?
Yeah, Miss Marvel has like some like I guess she just has some stretchy powers too.
The new
she
show
does.
makes it a little bit different. They change the power up just a bit.
Yeah, okay, well, she has stretchy. Malkia has stretchy limbs, but yeah. So this game will have 7 playable characters. We've gotten bios. Well, we know who all 7 are, but we've gotten the official videos for, I believe, 4 of them at this point. And then this mission report introduced the last one. They talk a little bit about combat skills. About as they introduced Malkia, they just introduced that her race that she kind of represents. They talk about getting DUMA points, collecting gems. This is kind of like one of the videos I mentioned, where it's a pretty beefy 7-minute video talking about a lot of gameplay systems that aren't specifically combat oriented, but more exploration or progression.
When I put my piece up earlier this year about like what I want to see in Star Ocean 6, I have brain worms for Star Ocean like mechanics that get not so much the like pure combat system, but all the subsystems that come into play, and whether that's crafting or all these passive active skills, all these other Duma or DUMA points, or whatever you want to call it, like
Remember, you got to spell it out. DUMA.
Yeah, you can't say it. So there's a lot there. I'm sure to be honest, it's very dense, this video, in terms of all the stuff it shows you. There's like these VA, they call it like VA actions. And then like, if you're in some sort of mode, you can't do these actions. I'm sure it'll make more sense once you actually get your hands on the game. And then they tease the next video, which will go more into things like crafting. And it showed Welch, and Welch has a look. Now she does. In her newest
fucking cracked me up when they showed her this video, dude.
So,
She has a get up going on. She has fucking sunglasses. She has
she's got like these they're almost like aviators with like this big floppy hat. Like, okay.
She has like shoulder frills.
Yeah.
Oh man, she's a lot. She's fucking Gucci'd up.
I forget if I asked this. Was Welch in Star Ocean 5?
Yeah.
Oh. Did she have a more standard look? Because I remember she had a really strange looking 4.
She looks different, but not too. You can see like, oh yeah, that's Welch.
Alrighty, that's good. That's all you need.
She's not dripped up like in this trailer.
All right.
Yeah, but you also saw us the skill tree in this trailer, which is scratching another funny part of my brain when I see it. But yeah, I'm with Adam. Like, I'm really curious to see what the next mission report is, because they cover all the rest of the battle mechanics in this mission report. And then the next one, there's like, we're gonna cover crafting and mini games. And then you saw some of the mini games. We already cleaned one of the mini games of this game, because like one of the pre-order incentives or whatever is like you're gonna get like Lenneth and like some other things like figurines for a mini game. And they kind of showed that in this trailer of like, hey, there's a Star Ocean 4 and Star Ocean 5 protagonist as like figurines for this mini game.
Like some sort of like chess game or something.
Yeah. And apparently you can equip them as like accessories as well, these figurines. So it's like, okay, that's weird. So yeah, early purchase bonus, you get Lenneth and Lizard from Valkyrie Profile, and then Jack and Ridley from Radiata Stories. Like, it's for the minigame Esoa. Like, okay, great. So I don't know, this game, at the very least, like this new Star Ocean feels like a really big step up from the last Star Ocean. I want to be optimistic about this game.
All right, we've got like a half dozen new release dates that came out of either the Gamescom announcements or just otherwise throughout the week. I believe I have these hopefully in chronological order. Something that's coming out in just a couple of weeks. we have a release date of September 15th for Absolute Tactics Daughters of Mercy. This is a game by publisher Akupara Games and developer Curious Fate. This is a tactical RPG with a sprite-based art style. So as Adam says, or actually it's not sprites, these are more marionettes. These are what we don't like, I suppose.
Yep. Yeah, it's got the marionette look. Like,
And if you haven't listened to this previous podcast, we mean where it's a 2D piece of art that is kind of modulated to imitate movement and motion. But coming out on PC and Switch on September 15th. It was originally announced last summer. So just another tactical indie game that kind of want to give these the benefits of the doubts, but they do kind of like start to blend together a little bit, just admittedly.
There's a lot of video games.
Yeah, there's a lot, and tactical RPGs are a popular genre for like these because they're accessible in terms of developing on a limited expertise or budget. But it'll be interesting to see if this ends up. It's also going to be available on both Steam, Epic, and GOG. So it's on all the Steam, all the PC platforms, all the major ones. So it'll be interesting to see if this ends up being something that can stand out from the crowd. It's in a couple of weeks in a relatively quiet time of the year, so maybe it'll have a chance to shine in the mid-September window. But we'll see if this ends up carrying forward any lasting impressions. We got a October release date for Gotham Knights, and so I actually haven't followed this, but you have in the header here, James, that it moved its release up to October 21st. So did this actually get pushed forward?
Just by like 4 days.
Okay. So this was always going to come out in October. We got a new villains trailer for the game, and then it'll release on October 21st. So I don't know if there's anything, like I said, the last time we talked about Gotham Knights, I don't really have a lot of affinity for the DC universe in general, but the villains that it showcases in this trailer are Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn, Clayface, and the Court of Owls. So all the major players from the universe.
The Court of Owls was sort of like the premise of the game. That's like the main villain, and then we didn't know like Harley or Mr. Freeze were going to be in the game. Like I guess
we knew Mr. Freeze was going to be in the game.
We did.
That was one of the early gameplay demos. Like that was the villain in that one.
Yeah.
All I remember from this trailer when it came out, like it was being debuted at I think it was opening night live or one of the Gamescom trailers. Yeah, well, one of the Twitch chatters was like, "Man, I'm rooting for the villains of this game. I hope they." That cracked me up, and that was the thing I remember this trailer by.
This is a game that I thought had already released, but hasn't. But that is from Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. This will also be releasing in October on October 25th for PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, both current and last-gen consoles. And I was like, didn't this game already release? But no, we're back to talking about early access. This is Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord released in early access back in 2020. And it seems like it'll have been there for about 2 years and is fully releasing this year on October 25th.
It's been 84 years.
Yeah, like I feel like just saying that doesn't put in perspective how long this game's been in development. Because it was announced in 2012.
Yeah. This thing has been it has been part of our lives for many years now. Yeah.
And even before it was announced, like Mount & Blade, specifically Warband, was one of those early like Steam games that like back before like PC gaming really blew up, it felt like Mount & Blade Warband was like one of the games that everyone just said, oh yeah, if you're going to play a game on PC, you should get Mount & Blade.
Yeah, I played the shit on Mount & Blade. There's just one of those things. Like, there's nothing really on PC, so I guess I'll play Mount & Blade. And I got like sucked up into it. And
it's still a legitimately great game. It's just obviously it's older, so it's harder to recommend to people. But it's Mount & Blade 2 has been, at least for older PC players, has been a very, very long-awaited sequel.
Yeah, I remember when cons were still a thing, and I was like barely starting out at RPG site. Like it was one of like the things I saw behind closed doors, like when they're like kind of showing off early gameplay of it.
I remember seeing early gameplay of Mount & Blade 2 at E3 2015.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Remember how we talked about earlier how Gundam had about 10,000 players, and Stalker 2 had about 4,000, 5,000. Mount & Blade 2. Currently, even though it's been on early access for a while, 17,000 players. Right now, it has 150,000 reviews. Like, it has been a popular game in early access. I wonder if that's going to spike even higher with a full release.
Yeah, it's one of those things where a lot of PC games fall into this trap where it feels like, and we even kind of fall into this issue too, where like most sites only really talk about multi-platform games. So a lot of PC exclusives are really, really popular, but just not conventionally talked about in the same way. So like you'll look at like the actual numbers and like games like Mountain Blade are like huge, like absolutely huge, and like Arma is huge, absolutely huge, and then so many of these games it's just like you don't see any discussions about them, which is
my
kind of weird.
uneducated hypothesis is that, and another game that I've been interested in but never been able to play, found time for, is Age of Empires 4, which has 20,000 players currently right now on Steam. I think these games, my hypothesis is that these games are like well suited and designed for like mono gamers, where they are an Age of Empires player or a Mountain Blade player, or they might play like one or two games, but it's just kind of like a close knit community that is, I don't want to say isolated, but just kind of like centralized, where they don't move from game to game. They just kind of like try out the one. I think for PC games in general seems to be more susceptible to that sort of thing. So you end up end up being like deceptively popular. Like, wow, this game has twice as many players as this other game that I expected to have more. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how high Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord spikes up once it releases in late October.
And to be clear, you mentioned that it is coming to consoles too. So at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I didn't.
No, you're right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it is coming to consoles.
I just still like think of it
PlayStation
as like a PC game.
Okay. Yeah.
November release date for Obsidian's Pentiment is November 15th. This was a game that was announced just earlier this year around the E3 timeline. This is the one that is the smaller scale title being helmed by Josh Sawyer that takes place in like Middle Ages. Is it Romania? I hope I got the country right.
Like Bavaria. Oops. Yeah. So this is like obviously a very small game with a smaller team, but I still think is a really interesting premise and art, which is it's mostly like it's RPG like in nature, but focused primarily around like branching dialogue, which I think is a core component of a lot of RPGs. So it'd be kind of cool to see one that's centrally designed around that specifically, that mechanic. And also because obviously Xbox owns Obsidian at this point, it will be on Game Pass day one. So I'm very interested in this game. It's just that mid-November is not a good time.
Yeah, it's kind of right in the middle of everything else.
But like I think it's like Tactics Ogre and the PC version of Valkyrie Elysium come out then. I'm not so much interested in it.
Oh, is PC Valkyrie later? I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Because I just earlier in this podcast I said Valkyrie was coming out September 29th. Yeah, Harvestella is in early November, and Pokemon we haven't even mentioned because there are no Pokemon updates this week, at least not major ones. But that's obviously a mid-November release as well. That's a major one. So yeah, Pentiment will be kind of fighting for attention, but I do think it is also in a lot of ways like a perfect Game Pass title because it is kind of experimental and different, and not what people might have expected from Obsidian.
Mm-hmm.
Only one sales update for this podcast, and that is for Monster Hunter Rise. Monster Hunter Rise has reached 11 million, and Sunbreak has surpassed 4 million sales total.
Good start.
I don't know if, it's a great start. James, what was it that you were like? I remember you kind of estimated what you might think that Sunbreak or Rise might end up doing. I think you said you were shooting for 20 million was your estimate.
I don't know if it necessarily has the legs to reach that now, but I do think it'll probably surpass 15 million when all is said and done.
Mm-hmm.
Which is still great. It's just like, and it shows that World wasn't just a fluke, and the series is well and truly a global series now, which is still wild to think about. Because I remember back in the day, like when 3 Ultimate was coming out, the developers said that was ultimately their goal, to make the series as popular in the West as it is in Japan. And it's like still crazy to see. It's like, yeah, they've just straight up done it, like 2 games in a row. So it's like,
and in different release environments too, with the Switch and then PC versus the multi-platform and PC.
Yep. Anyways, Sunbreak's out. I still need to write up something about my impressions about the first title update. They are going to be positive. I want those title updates to come out, not just because I want to play more, but also because as soon as we are done with title updates for Sunbreak, that means we'll finally get to see what Monster Hunter 6, whatever it's called, is going to be.
And speaking of title updates, title update 2 it will be launching in late September, and it looks like the headliner for that update is Flaming. It's the one I can't pronounce. Espinas. Hopefully, Flaming Espinas. Is Flaming Espinas from another game, or is it a unique variant?
I think it's the subspecies from.
I remember I tried. I can't keep subspecies and variants apart, and don't bother explaining it to me because I'll forget. But is Flaming
Yeah.
Espinas a new one?
I don't. Well, I never played Frontier, so I couldn't say for
I
sure.
don't think it's new. I don't
I
think
don't
it's
think
new.
it's new, but
Huh.
again, like I haven't played Frontier, so don't quote me on it.
Mm. And then the last line item that I have here, and we've kind of brought this up in a few different places in this podcast, is that yes, Gamescom is ending, I think tomorrow at the time of recording, but we're going to go right into September, right into Tokyo Game Show. And obviously, there's a lot of things that are speculated to show up there, and a few things that have been announced as to show up there or teased at. And one of the first ones, one of the major ones, is that Koei Tecmo has announced that they will reveal a new Gust game at Tokyo Game Show 2022. Koei Tecmo is already going to show Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which is what we started this podcast with in the news section. But they have also announced that they are going to be announcing a new title from Gust. So a few things that people thought that this might be like Blue Reflection or an Atelier game.
People keep getting hung up on that supposed leak for a Fire Emblem game by Gus, and I keep telling people no. Like, if you look at what the rumors are and you look at like what the like development pipeline would have been, there's no way this game is actually fucking real. It would have been in like the heat of its development during COVID in the same year where like Gus released 3 games.
I did not hear the rumor that Gus was releasing a Fire Emblem game.
The rumor was that the new Fire Emblem game is in collaboration with Gust.
Yeah, and it's like,
I had not heard that. I mean, I'm Koei Tecmo. I'm not surprised, but specifically Gus, it's kind of interesting.
You remember the one with the red and blue hair protagonist, right? That Fire
people
Emblem.
have been calling her
I remember that. I didn't realize that was tied to Gust. I do remember the red and blue haired image, though.
Well, presumably, I still don't believe the rumor just because like Gust was already overworked then, and especially if the rumor is that the game's been done for a year. It's like no way in hell.
So yeah. Anyways, Gust has clearly 2 teams working on Atelier games. They just released Sophie 2 like 5 months ago, or something like that. So is this possibly a new Atelier game, a follow up to another one, or is it like what's the Fairy Tail team doing? I don't know. So Fairy Tail 2, heard it here.
There you go.
Do it. So.
Congrats, Chow.
No, not a Gust.
Okay, fine. It won't be Fairy Tail, but it's Eden Zero now.
Can we finally get a 4th Dusk game? Can we get like another Atelier like Aisha follow up, like maybe an Aisha 2 to finally have a proper follow up to the game's ending, or maybe like
I mean, they did it with the Arlen Saga. I mean, they've done
it with Arlen and they've done it with Mysterious. So the only one of the modern like Atelier games that they haven't done yet is Dusk. So it feels like it's a matter of time.
If it's a new Ryza, then merch people are going to be happy. They're like, yeah, more Ryza.
More money out of my wallet.
Yeah, let's go.
But yeah, obviously Tokyo Game Show is one that we always keep our eyes on, and will be certain things that we expect to see and certain things will hopefully surprise us. And that's only a couple weeks away. I think it's mid-September, like September 18th. I don't remember the dates.
There's actually a really big one too for VR people, because they're going to have a Resident Evil Village playable for the first time in VR using the PlayStation VR 2 over there. So that's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, they've got that listed at the front of Capcom's website for capcomgames.com/TGS is Resident Evil Village VR. But yeah, we'll obviously follow. We'll be a couple weeks before we see any details from that, but that'll be a big focus in late September alongside the release of the console versions of Valkyrie Elysium. We've got Made in Abyss coming in early September, and then we've already talked about all the October and November games we're looking into. So it's gonna be a race from here to the end of the year. I don't think we're gonna have any more breathers on the news front or on the game front. So strap in. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. This was a huge news-focused episode of the podcast. There was a ton of stuff to go through, and I did not write a single one of these news pieces. This was all Kite, Adam, James, Josh, and others. So thank you so much for all like keeping up on all the stuff on the site and getting all these things, all the entities updated with the dates, with the details of the new releases, with new titles, publishers and developers, which change around. So I know it's a lot of work on the back end to make sure that all this stuff gets sorted straight and detailed and put up on the site correctly. You have something, James?
Yeah, I think the next event that might be relevant to us, we don't know yet, is like there's going to be some Disney and Marvel games showcase on September 9th. So it's not going to be for another few weeks as well. And that happens right before TGS starts. But you never know. Maybe there'll be a new cool
Why am
thing from
I-
Disney and Marvel for RPGs. Don't know.
Why am I getting visions of that one last Final Fantasy 15 live stream?
They did say Marvel's Midnight Suns will be there, so we might see like a new release date for that. Like we only saw that's going to come during the
later in the fiscal
years.
year. The
Yeah.
strangest, most specific delay announcement.
So well, we might finally see a new release date on that, a more specific one. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. I think it's going to be a relatively quiet week next week for game stuff.
Maybe
We'll
I'll
see.
finally
this
finish
one.
Xenoblade.
What'd you say, Adam?
Compared to this one, anyway. This
Oh,
week was
God,
hectic.
Yeah, this week was insane.
Hell nightmare.
Mhm. So yeah, RPG Site can be found on all the social media channels on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We have a Discord, discord.gg/RPG Site. Go to rpgsite.net itself. We've got the SD Gundam Alliance, SD Gundam Battle Alliance review and guides, all the Xenoblade guides. Soul Hackers 2 is up as well. As well as all the trailers for all the new games that we kind of rattled through in this podcast today. If you do listen to this podcast and you listen to us through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the like, please give us a review, an honest review. It'll help us know if we're doing everything right or if we need to shift our focus at all. It would help us a lot. So if you do listen to us, we would appreciate that if you are so inclined. But other than that, stay tuned and stay safe until you hear from us next time. Take care. We'll talk to you then.
Later, everyone.
What if the podcast reviews are like, maybe you shouldn't talk about RPGs. We want you to talk about anything but RPGs.
Fighting games, guys.